This meeting is being recorded.
Evans?
Yes.
Buchan?
Yo.
Miller?
Here.
English?
Here.
McEvers?
Here. Do we have Pastor Owens on?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor and City Council. Thank you very much for allowing me to honor Christ in this meeting. We're in desperate need of God in our land and city at this time. Psalm 34:17 says, "The righteous cry out, the Lord hears and delivers them out of all their troubles." So pray with me. Let's bow our heads and hearts. And Father, we call out to you in Jesus' name that you would hear from heaven and move in our city. I pray that you touch each life in this meeting tonight. Bless our mayor and his family, God, and everything he's connected with and all of his influence. I pray your blessing on each member of the city council. Pour out your grace, your favor, your wisdom on this gathering tonight. We pray great grace over the decision making that's going to be taking place tonight, and each one of the presenters, just bless them. God, I just pray for peace over the city of Coeur d'Alene and the surrounding area. Father, I lift up every small business in our area that you would bless and you would restore them. Father, protect the families, individuals. Lord, I lift up first responders to you right now. God, with all their challenges, that you would just lead and guide them and be a firewall around them. Let your will be accomplished tonight in this meeting and for the better for our city. In Jesus' name, amen.
Woody, lead us in the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Don't have any amendments to the agenda tonight, so we will move to public comment. Do we have anyone online, Renata, for public comment tonight?
A little technical difficulty, so that information will be coming from the booth momentarily.
We have 4 comments.
Okay, so we'll start with the first one. Obviously start with
Chaz, can you announce the first one?
First one's from a Benjamin Drake.
Sorry, that's actually Jennifer Drake. Did you? I'm trying to figure out why I don't have video here.
You're on, Jennifer, if you wanted to go ahead and start.
Okay, can you hear me? Is that all right?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Mayor and Council, thank you for taking the time to evaluate the proposal for Rebound Downtown Coeur d'Alene today. While there have been discussions for many years about the potential of closing Sherman Avenue to vehicle traffic in some capacity, I think we can all agree that those conversations have never taken place in anything remotely resembling the current climate. Here's the reality. We are living in a pandemic. As much as some people here like to think that Coeur d'Alene exists in a bubble, we do not. This is a pandemic that has reached all corners of the globe and has taken a serious shot through the heart of our downtown core. I don't think anyone was prepared for the rapid onslaught of difficulties that we would face as a society and on another level as a business community. To say that survival during this time has been difficult would be a massive understatement. Businesses are closing, and those that have managed to stay open have done so at great financial and personal losses. Everything that makes our downtown special, the vibrant restaurants, the small businesses, lovingly built year over year, the tourist attractions and local haunts, the friendly and welcoming atmosphere, it's all in danger. We are not immune to the crushing blow this pandemic has dealt, and wishful thinking will not make it so. This is happening everywhere and is in no way unique to our downtown businesses. What is unique for us, however, is that we are in a position to potentially do something about it. Our downtown is in an ideal position to effectively address the constraints placed on us by the current situation. By closing a stretch of Sherman to vehicle traffic for the rest of the summer, our downtown would be seriously open for business. Because of health regulations and social distancing guidelines, most businesses, mine included, are restricted to half of our normal capacity. Half. That means half of our customers, half of our sales, and half of our ability to remain a viable business. And the reality is that we have no idea how long this is going to last. No one does. But if we were allowed to expand over the sidewalk and into the street just for this summer, our capacity would come closer to 100% and we would have a much better chance of weathering this storm. I know that there are some concerns about losing drive-by traffic and parking, especially for retail businesses. We've never tried this before, so some people have nothing to compare it to except for the downtown street fair every summer. But this is an entirely different animal. This is not a situation where we would be inundated with outside vendors and extremely limited spacing. Each business would have control over their own space and would be able to expand as they saw fit, within city guidelines, of course. We have 2 incredible new parking garages that are just begging for cars, and drive-by traffic has nothing on foot traffic as far as boosting sales is concerned. And let's be honest, most of the vehicle traffic on Sherman is not people looking to stop and shop. Cruising Sherman has been a thing since my parents were kids. Not that it isn't fun to do, but it brings nothing to the businesses they just drive by. However, increased foot traffic will boost sales, not to mention the exciting and inviting atmosphere it will create. Now more than ever, there's a reason that cities of all sizes around the country have already made this decision. They've rightly come to the conclusion that closing certain streets to vehicle traffic and allowing streeteries and street hail is the smart and safe way to move forward. This is a time that requires creative thinking and adaptability. When they say adapt or die, this is what it means. This is not about benefiting any individual business. It is much larger than that. This is about keeping our entire downtown business community afloat. And since hindsight is 2020, let's use a little hindsight in 2020. Most of the incredible projects that this community has undertaken in the last decade or so, McEwen Park, the Kroc Center, the library, the education corridor, they didn't have unanimous support. But with bold leadership and smart planning, we stayed the course and they have become some of our biggest success stories. Let's add this project to that list. Close the street temporarily or see businesses close permanently. That's our reality. Please vote for option A of the Rebound Downtown Coeur d'Alene proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up for public comment.
We have Ian Smith.
Go ahead, Ian.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent, thank you. So I'm Ian Smith. I live in downtown Coeur d'Alene on Indiana at 7th, not far from Sherman Avenue, and I'm here today to offer my feedback on the proposal supported by the city staff that will allow for the creation of parklets and expanded sidewalks on Sherman while maintaining vehicle traffic. I'm in favor of the proposal with the exception of the part about maintaining vehicle traffic on Sherman. And the reason for my position is that I believe that the current proposal seems to be a compromise that doesn't really address the problem, which I see as this. You know, many people, like myself, I'm a senior citizen. I want to go and visit our local restaurants and coffee shops and, you know, go have a coffee with my friends. And I really miss that. But I'm reluctant to go inside of a restaurant or a shop because of the risk of COVID-19 transmission being higher indoors, right? I'd like to sit outside at a fire or Fine Brew and have a coffee or Tito's because they already have outside seating. But, you know, I walk down to the end of the street. I take a look down Sherman Avenue. I see the sidewalks packed, the streets busy, and I don't go down. I avoid the downtown. So I think expanding the footprints of Sherman Avenue businesses onto the sidewalks will address my concern about not having to go indoors, but combining customers and pedestrians on the same sidewalks, I think will increase people density. And I'm not sure I'll feel any safer going downtown. So I think we have to ask ourselves a different question. And I think the question that we need to ask is, how do we best separate pedestrians from the people who want to visit the shops and the restaurants on Sherman? And I can think of 3 options to achieve this. There's, I'm sure, many more. I've already told you my preference for restricting vehicle traffic on Sherman and dedicating the sidewalks to the local businesses so they can expand their footprints. I realize, that there's got to be a reason that you're not moving forward with that. And that, I read in the paper that the survey, and only 53% of businesses who responded to the survey were in favor of doing that. So, I understand the pressure for a compromise. And so I thought, what are some other options, right? And the first one I came up with is, maybe you do a bake-off and you designate a couple of blocks for the parklets and expanded sidewalks and a couple of blocks where Sherman's closed to vehicle traffic. It would give you a great way to test it over the 3-month summer, and it would help you determine, which approach to use next summer, if at all. Was it popular? Which worked? What did the merchants think? I think it would be fantastic. Now, a second compromise option might be to make Sherman one way for the summer and take the extra lane that you free up and you create a pedestrian lane on Sherman while allowing the merchants and the restaurants and the shops to expand onto the sidewalks. And if you were to take that lane and break it up into two so that you had an eastbound and a westbound lane, sort of like one way, you would have an opportunity to help people avoid having to pass one another face to face on a lane. So just to wrap up, I think that we're really lucky here in Kootenai County. We've got 75 known infections. It's a great place to, pass the pandemic. But even with this relatively low risk, many of us are nervous about being in crowds, going downtown, spending our money. So if our Sherman Avenue businesses are to do well during the pandemic, and I think it's critical that they do, people have to feel comfortable enough to come downtown and open their wallets. So I think separating pedestrians and customers is really important to achieve this. And, if you accept a compromise proposal that doesn't maximize this separation between the pedestrian and the customers, and infections, pop up and they get worse, you're not going to have time to recover, and we may lose the summer. So, keeping the sidewalks for customers and Sherman for pedestrians should help to mitigate the risk to our local businesses. So I'm very much in favor of the proposal. I'd like to keep the traffic off Sherman. Thanks.
Thank you. Next up, please.
Users called the NYC Piano Bar. I'm sure they'll announce themselves.
You're on the air. Did I ever tell you I don't like Zoom?
I'm assuming that's the owner of the piano bar. It is your turn to talk.
He's on Emily's phone. Would she be able to bring her phone up for him to talk?
You can try. I'm not sure the audio will be that great, but you can try.
I can call him. He's texting me.
Oh,
Do you want me to call him?
if he wants to hear public comment.
Can we go on to the next one, Renata? Let's go on to the next
Like the
one.
next one would be Jim Riley.
Jim, are you there?
I thought we had this.
Tim Riley is here.
Yes, go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council, first off, I just want to congratulate you all, and particularly our law enforcement, on the great job they did downtown last night in a tense situation. I'm just very impressed, as I have been. I did ask to speak tonight. I want to speak to the proposal to close Sherman Avenue. I want to do so from the perspective of a citizen. I don't own a business on Sherman, but many of the business on Sherman have run my credit card many, many times because I go downtown to both eat and enjoy my local companions here in town, and also to shop. I am also very serious about keeping myself safe from the COVID virus. I take my personal safety very seriously, and I am potentially at risk given my age group. And I also have some very highly at risk members of my family that I'm very interested in protecting. So I've been careful downtown looking, and I can tell you if you walk downtown today, as all of you know, it is difficult to walk on Coeur d'Alene city sidewalks. In fact, it's just impossible if anybody's coming towards you, and to maintain 6 feet of separation that's required. So my safety standards are pretty clear. If I'm going to visit a downtown venue, I'm going to first off be outside, number one, because that's what keeps me safe, and secondarily, I want enough space to be able to stay 6 feet away from others who might also be enjoying downtown. So I just want to offer my voice as a very frequent downtown user for option A, to close Sherman and to dedicate the street so that people can walk safely, and at the same time enjoy their businesses and get back to enjoying our Coeur d'Alene community. That's all I had to say, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. Emily, do we have any success there?
Yes, I have them on my phone.
Well, we'll come up there and we'll see if it works.
All right, Dan. You're at her. Yes, you're. 1 second. Okay, try talking, Dan.
Hello? Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I don't think that's
Not gonna work.
That's gonna
Okay.
work. Yeah, if he wants to, Emily, but if he wants to, maybe either email you or text you a message,
Okay.
and when we get to that topic, we can have you come up and read what he had to say, just so he can
I
get
have
his.
2 other business owners that are having troubles too, so,
Well,
and they,
well, see if they can get you a quick email, and then you
Okay.
can read their emails.
got it.
Then when we get to that point, we can have you come up and read them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
We have one additional comment from Jack Ray.
Okay. Jack, you there?
I believe so. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor and council members. My name is Jack Riggs, and I've submitted some written comments, and I'll essentially read my letter. But as a preface, I do want to say that I completely agree with the previous comments. I think they're very well stated, and really that was what caused me to get involved in this issue was really brainstorming a few weeks ago about how to help small businesses located in our downtown areas that have limited footprint under the social distancing guidelines. So, essentially my comments, and I'm going to say, really come both as a person that's lived in this community my entire life and also as a physician. So with that, as an introduction, I've lived in the downtown Sanders Beach area for 35 years, and I've had an office at 4th and Sherman for the past 15 years. So I am quite familiar with downtown in all of its seasons. The idea to close Sherman temporarily to vehicular traffic and allow businesses to expand onto the sidewalks and streets arose out of a need to address CDC and Health Department recommended social distancing in a creative manner and be beneficial to downtown business owners who've been seriously injured by government mandated closures due to coronavirus. This proposal to close Sherman to vehicular traffic is a temporary 3-month response to COVID-19 to help provide relief to our community, both for businesses and patrons. The greatest business threat to all of us it would be a new outbreak of the coronavirus in the Coeur d'Alene area, which could cause us to revert to previous closure orders. With all of the visitors our city is already attracting from other states internationally, this is a significant threat that we need to guard against. In your package, you have been presented with much information and 2 options, options A and B. As a doctor, for health and safety reasons, and per the emails and letter that I have previously submitted, I clearly support option A to suspend vehicular traffic on 4 blocks of Sherman and allow each business owner to utilize the space in front of their business to the best of their ability to better able to responsibly socially distance and survive as a business. Option B, to keep two-way vehicular traffic on Sherman, create narrow parklets and keep all foot traffic on the existing sidewalks would not even allow proper 6-foot social distancing, as Jim Riley alluded to. To continue traffic and make a hodgepodge of street parklets and car parking spots would be, in my opinion, a dysfunctional compromise, unwelcome to customers, somewhat like King Solomon's suggestions to split the baby. Of course, one should never split a baby. Cars and people in such close proximity is not a good mix, not a welcoming mix, not a safe mix. Option B, apparently to be recommended by staff, is simply not a good solution as proposed. Perhaps no change at all might even be better. If option B is considered, which I hope it is not, Sherman traffic should be one way, west to east, single lane, and with a reduced speed limit of no more than 15 miles per hour. Closing traffic on 4 blocks of Sherman this summer is supported by a majority, more than 50%, but not all downtown businesses. But as has already been described, no concept for change is ever supported 100%. Look at the incredible success of a contested McEwen Park. Downtown should be a place of welcome gathering, a place of community. Please do not miss this opportunity to be creative, innovative, and truly beneficial in the face of this serious adversity of coronavirus. Please demonstrate your insightful leadership and support option A to help Coeur d'Alene rebound. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Jack. Is that the end of the comment, Renata?
That is all we had for online comments. There might
Okay.
be some in the room here.
All right. Thank you. We'll move on in the agenda to a presentation, Septic Tank Abatement Program. Mike?
All right.
Mayor and council,
Your stuff, right?
to give me a moment to figure out the intricacies of this system. Is it full screen? Okay. There we are. Okay, that wasn't too bad. Okay, thank you very much. So, hot button item here, I appreciate. Just sit back, relax, enjoy the feature presentation of septic tank abatements. And I am actually quite pleased to discuss this. I was informed that you guys were interested in this, and I'll explain to you why it is interesting. So, firstly, what is a septic tank? Just to make sure we're all on the same page. And the septic tank, here's just a general conventional septic system. As you can see, this is the septic tank here. So what would happen is your wastewater from your house, again, wastewater is your toilet water, your shower water, all that other water the wastewater generated at your house, would go into the septic tank, and then the solid portion would settle onto the bottom, and overflowing out of the top would be cleaner water, which then would go to some sort of a drain field. And you can see here what happens in the septic system. It would then, at that point, it percolates into the ground. Where we are, that would be the aquifer. So that's the reason why I'm kind of excited about talking to you about this, because it really gets to the heart of what wastewater is and what our job is, what we're trying to do. And that is to protect our community. We're trying to protect all of us. In other words, if there were, Panhandle Health will say, you can have a septic system if you've got 5 acres, but if you've got 1/8 of an acre, you can't have a septic system. There's just too many of us in one spot to really discharge that wastewater environmentally efficiently. So we knew that a long time ago. That's why we created a wastewater treatment plant. We as in the city, have 2 laws that are specific, or 2 ordinances that are specific to septic tanks. And I won't go into the details, but the first one's 13.12.030 says, we as a city said, no one can have a septic tank. If you live in the city and you are within a reasonable distance, which is 200 feet of city public sewer, then you need to be on that sewer. And then the second ordinance here is more of a time frame. So once we realize that you're not on the city sewer and you're still on septic, we can issue a letter, and it just gives you a time frame. Okay, we've got Originally, it was 100 days. We extended it to 365 days to connect up, to give people time to connect. So, I'd like to go over a little bit of the scope here quickly of the problem. So on the map on the right there, you can see everything in red is a parcel that doesn't have sewer connected to it, or is not getting billed for sewer, moreover. That totals 1,708 parcels. So that's a lot to go through. So what we did was we kind of figured out, and by we, I mean our awesome Debbie Frisbee in the GIS department. She really helped out and goes through, okay, how many of those belong to the city of Coeur d'Alene? 94 of them. How many are HOAs? You know, it's probably a park or something and it belongs to an HOA. 350. And then we go through all of these: new construction, NIC, the school district, utilities, some many aren't developed. So the remainder is this 490. Those are the ones that aren't so easy. They're not the low-hanging fruit. It's a little harder to figure out exactly what is going on with those parcels. So that just takes more investigative work, whether it's dye testing at the site or looking for easements or that sort of thing to see are they or are they not connected to sewer. And it takes a lot of staff time. This is not a high priority item for us right now. We have much greater than 99% of the parcels are currently connected to sewer. So this is not a huge problem for us. We address it as time permits. Usually what happens is the septic tank will fail. If a septic tank fails, Panhandle Health will not allow you to get a permit to repair it if you're within, if you're able to be connected to sewer. So usually that's when these letters get issued. To give you an idea of the scope of the problem or of this program, over the last 11 years, we've handed out, I think, 43 letters in total. So it's pretty small. It's not a huge septic tank abatement program where we're blanketing the market, but that's the amount of parcels we currently have right now. And with that is the end of my presentation. I wanted to give you a quick overview of it, but I'd be glad. I understand that maybe you might have some questions or comments. I'd be glad to listen to them.
Sure. Questions from council. Woody.
So, Mike, as I understand, the first rule was 1981. Is that correct? The first?
Actually, it was in 1973, I believe, is when we said, or in the 70s. Let me say that. It was prior to 81 that we actually said you need to. 1976 was our first when we first issued a code saying that septic tanks are not allowed.
Okay, I read one that said something about if the 365 days kind of came along a little later. There was something in the past about if you can't afford to hook up, that the city could put it against your lien against your property. So again, people who are struggling, and when your sewer fails, it's kind of a struggling time. Is that still in there, or has that been taken out, and is it a possibility?
So, yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That is sort of the elephant in the room, I guess, right? When it comes to connecting to sewer, this is an expensive undertaking. There's a $3,000 cap fee and digging holes and excavating the road. This could get quite expensive. So, yeah, it's legally still a possibility. We could install the sewer if we so decided. You're connecting, we're going to make you connect, we're going to put a lien on your property. That's probably not a very attractive thing to either the homeowner, the property owner, or the city to have to track that for the next 35 years until that house gets sold. So we don't really do it, but legally, yeah, it's still technically an option.
I know we look at it in our CBD grants every year, but that's kind of aimed at people at a low income source and helps them a lot. I mean, it's a big project. So just thinking about the way things happen sometimes is, you can help somebody out and then they sell the property, it's hooked up. I mean, it adds value right out of the hole, but theoretically that still is available, I guess, huh?
Yes,
worst case scenario.
It is still available, and yeah, that's one of the things we're trying to avoid is surprises, because some people don't even know it. Maybe they buy a first-time home buyer, and all of a sudden they realize, wow, I'm still in septic, and nobody wants to get surprised like that.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mike? Dan.
Well, just to clarify, when you say they put a lien on the property, that's one thing, but basically it means the city would have to upfront all of that money, and we're basically loaning it to them, and then, eventually down the road, a lien. But I don't think we want to be in the business of fronting, all of that. So.
Anything else for Mike? All right, thank you very much, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mike.
We will move on to announcements. Any member of the council have an announcement tonight? Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As we know, the 4th of July is coming up, and the Chamber has canceled their fireworks show. Normally, for July 4th, we take the parking revenue. We have a resolution we pass here, and the parking revenue, instead of going to our Parks Capital Improvement Fund, goes to the Chamber to help pay for the fireworks show. This year there will be no fireworks show, so I would like to place an item on the agenda for discussion with council and the next meeting to consider taking the funding for the parking on July 4th and redirecting that into the general fund to reimburse public safety for July 4.
So Dan, you'd like to see this discussion item on the next council agenda?
Yes, for the next agenda, just place an item for discussion on how much revenue that would be, and giving it to public safety, because there's going to be a lot of overtime and other costs incurred, and there may be other needs that we aren't aware of. But I thought, since we normally take that money and give it to a fireworks show, why don't we just give it to our first responders who are going to be working that day anyway, and help them out a little bit.
Any other comments from council? So we would be bringing that item forward to discuss and make the decision at the next meeting. Renata, there wouldn't be any price change. We have a set price now, so it wouldn't require any public hearing notice on a price change?
Correct.
Okay, all right. Woody, did you have something? Okay, so would you want to vote on that, or can we just direct staff to come back with a report? Renata, does that work?
That'll work.
Okay, Troy, made a note on that.
Thank you.
Any other council member have anything tonight? I have some appointments. Olivia Metz to the Ignite CDA board, Chris Pfeiffer and Michael Drobnock to the CDA TV committee, if council would be so inclined.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move for approval of the consent calendar, including resolutions 20034.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. Any further discussion? Roll call, please, Renata.
Guggen?
Yeah.
English?
Yes.
Wood?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
McEvers?
Yes.
Motion carried. We'll move on to other business. This would be consideration of the waiver of outdoor seating permit fee for the 2020 season. Kelly, is she zooming in? Kelly, you're up.
I'm not going to be able to see my video because it said the host has stopped it, so I can talk. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, good.
And I
So
believe
good
this,
evening, Mayor and Council. Kelly Setters, Deputy City Clerk, here to bring forward a request to waive sewer fees for outdoor seating due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Outdoor sewer seating permits are required from March 17th to November 1st of each year. This permit allows outdoor seating on private property and city sidewalks for restaurant dining and drinks. Sewer fees for restaurants and bars are charged based on the number of seats. Most restaurants only paid the interior seats at the time they opened. Once the city allowed outdoor seating, the business owners could choose to pay for the additional seats on the temporary basis unless they wanted to pay that additional fee for a more permanent count. Some facilities have seats on private property, so they do not pay the encroachment permit fee, but still pay the temporary seat fee. The sewer fees are reduced to $22.13 per seat because they're temporary and not used year-round. Last year, 39 outdoor seating permits were issued with a total revenue of $16,119, including $2,875 in encroachment permit fees, for a total of $18,994. It was determined by the governor's Idaho Rebounds Protocol that restaurants could open on May 16th, provided they comply with the physical distancing requirements. This change could reduce the number of seats within the restaurant by approximately 50%, which results in a reduction in sewer. So, prior to the COVID shutdown, several businesses already paid the outdoor seating fee. So at this time, staff has delayed collecting payment pending council action tonight. At stage 4, or when the time comes that restaurants can move to full seating, staff is recommending waiving the fee for the rest of the year and reimbursing those that have already paid the seasonal fee. Wastewater Superintendent Mike Anderson is in support of waiving the fee for this year. Staff recommends that the $125 encroachment permit still be required, as well as the filing of an outdoor seating permit application, so staff can ensure the ADA placement of table and chairs and provide the regulations related to the encroachment on city property. Currently, 16 permits have been issued and paid in full. If the fees are waived for this year, the city would need to reimburse a total of $6,635.14. So the financial impact would be that $16,119 amount. So to conclude, should the City Council grant a waiver of sewer fees for temporary outdoor seating for the year 2020 and reimburse a total of $6,635.14? I stand for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Kelly. Council questions? Quiet group tonight. Dan, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor.
Speaking of not quiet, go ahead.
Yes, the not quiet one.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kelly. And I'm in support of this. I think this is a great thing that the city can do within our authority to show our appreciation for those businesses that have suffered. And it has been brought up to me a number of times by various downtown business owners, what can the city do to help? And this is one of the things that's under our umbrella that we can help to waive those fees. I also want to mention that it was brought up to me, since I was so positive about that, they also said, well, what about waiving the liquor licenses? Since there were a lot of bars and restaurants that were open and that they paid an annual liquor license, but for 2 months there they weren't allowed to use the liquor license. And Renata ran up some figures for us, and the city was responsible only for shutting down the bars and so on for just 3 days before the state came in and shut everything down and overruled us. So I ran the numbers on what the reimbursement would be if we decided that for those 3 days we were going to reimburse the liquor fees, and on average it comes down to about $4 a day per business, which is just not an incredible amount of money. And I think if they want to take on the state regarding that's their thing. But I would say, as far as us reimbursing liquor licenses, that doesn't. I think the reimbursing or waiving the fees for the sidewalks is far more beneficial to the businesses than going into the liquor license for our part.
All right, thank you, Dan. Anyone else? Dan English.
Well, I think this makes a lot of sense, and I'm going to support it, but I do have kind of a yellow warning light going off that, there are all kinds of businesses, that aren't downtown, aren't restaurants, and fees that people are paying for different things, and, we're going to have to watch where that line comes down, because, this is easy and makes sense, but, we're going to need some of those fees too. So it's just, like I say, kind of a warning flag going up.
And Renata, just for clarification, these are for outdoor seating fees for everywhere. It's not just downtown. It's going to be anywhere in the city that these fees are paid. They're going to be waived for this year.
Yes, it would be anywhere that's not already paid for in a sewer cap fee. We have some of the newer restaurants like Cosmic Cowboy that paid for that with their new construction. So most of these are older existing businesses that did not already pay that sewer fee.
Woody?
So Dan, did you ever run the numbers, like if we were to help them on their liquor license not being able to use for the 2 months, does that come out to be anything significant that would be helpful?
Yeah. If we went for the time that they were down, the 10 weeks, it actually, our part would be $270. And that's an average, so, each one's paying a different amount for their liquor fees. So I just took the total number of businesses, so some are paying $300, some are paying $762, but I just took all the numbers and the total. And so this is kind of an average, it's a ballpark, and that would be, for the complete amount of time, the city would be on the hook for about $11,000 that we would have to reimburse. But I think, that's not really all the fees. They're also paying county liquor fees. They're also paying state liquor fees. And if, when the dust settles on this, if they want to go after the state and the county and us as like a class action, then that we'll deal with that at that time. But that would be the bigger of the two numbers. So it would be more like $12 that we would, if we were going to reimburse them for just the 3 days that we were shutting them down, versus $270, more or less, for the complete amount of time. And that's why I think the sewer cap fee thing is going to be far more beneficial to them, because I think the cost is a lot more.
No, I see it, and I was just thinking that it's something. It's not a lot, but at least we're stepping up and saying, hey, the state did this, and you're not using our portion of the liquor license during that time. So that's kind of where I was drifting towards you. I get the 3 days is really not probably worth the paper, but the 270 as an average it's something, know, and we haven't been able to walk down the street giving every business $1,000 yet. So here's $270. That I think it comes from the heart. It comes from the right place of why we're trying to help in the limitations that we have, and we're pretty limited. And I get it, Dan. We don't want to be giving away all the money, but.
Some of it, okay.
A little here and there could go a long way, possibly, So that's interesting that you went down that road,
All right. Any other questions for Kelly? If there are no other questions, we'll be looking for council action.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we waive the outdoor seating permit sewer fee for the 2020 season.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Kelly. We'll move on to the next item, which is discussion of the Rebound Downtown Coeur d'Alene proposal that includes the possibility of closing off portions of Sherman Avenue and allowing more parklets to help respond to COVID-19 by allowing the local business to expand outdoors on the sidewalks and or in the street in front of their businesses. Hillary.
Council, I need to get this other one loaded up. Sorry about that. Let's see.
Maybe Hillary, I'll ask, before you get started, I'll ask
Sure.
Emily. Emily, did you have any success on getting any information?
I have 2 emails, but I also have them on the phone line.
Yeah, phone line's probably not gonna.
No, on the
Oh,
Zoom phone.
you have them on the Zoom, okay.
Yeah, we got that going. So
Okay, so
either way, I can read or they can.
Renata, is that available so we can have them give their presentation or their
Would that
comments
be
before we
preferable to
start
have
the
that
presentation?
first before mine? We could certainly do that. If that's easier.
Jazz, can you get the 2 public comment persons on Zoom up for the mayor, please?
As soon as they raise their hand.
Okay, I just felt in fairness, we should probably have all the comments before the presentation.
Thank you.
We have a Lacey Moen.
Lacey, are you there?
Hello.
Lacey.
Hi, you guys. I'm here.
Okay, go ahead. We can hear you.
Oh, awesome. How are you guys doing? I feel like this is like the weirdest city council meeting I've ever tried to watch or be a part of, but I'm glad that we figured part of this out.
All right.
Okay, so I wrote an email to you guys. I don't know if you've gotten it at all, but this is kind of my perspective on the entire closing of Sherman and other options like that. So I'm just going to read my email and then go from there. Does that work?
That works.
Okay, it says, Dear Mayor Whitmire and council members, I'm writing this as a request to rethink the closing or altering of Sherman Avenue. Most of you know me from last year's campaign and know that the love I have for this town and its people. Over the last 4 months, our town and all the businesses in Coeur d'Alene have been affected badly by the COVID-19, some worse than others. This is a time to stay clear-headed and think about the whole and not the few. We have a task of deciding whether to close Sherman or limit traffic or leave it alone. I prefer you leave it alone. I've owned Earthly Beauty Bar for 9 years on 4th and Front and seen my share of change. While only being open for a year, I had all of 4th and Front shut down for over a year due to the construction of McEwen Park and parking structure with zero assistance by the city or even grace with many parking tickets. They are all paid, by the way. By the grace of God, my business survived, but barely. Having no traffic and no parking was devastated. I am one of the only businesses that stayed in the same location or did not close. Now, I've been beyond supportive to all of you during the massive backlash you received about the parking issues for years. I now feel like all that was for nothing. Restricting parking on Sherman, making it difficult to access McEwen, as well as its parking seemed illogical. Loss of income for the city and many unhappy residents frustrated with parking will deter more visitors to our wonderful downtown. My business thrives on its ability to allow clients to park near me without even more traffic delay that this will already cause. Last Saturday, even with Sherman open, the cars backed up all the way down Northwest Boulevard. Now, that's not new. It's common during the summer months. It's already a challenge to get downtown when it's busy, and this will make it worse. I do agree something should be done to help businesses, but not just some. I think all need love and some out-of-the-box ideas. This is not a new proposal. This is one that's been discussed and denied for 4+ years, and I think for good reason. Now is the time to come together as a family to assist one another and not hurt many to help a few. Lakeside is downtown. Front is downtown. Our restaurants and retail expand far beyond 2nd and 6th Street. They branch in every direction. I would love to see what businesses responded to the survey, because I spoke to many of them and they did not know anything about it. And that needs to be a much larger discussion than what feels like a quick push by businesses that are only thinking of themselves and not the entire downtown community. Business is hard, quarantine or not, but let's not make this any more difficult or confusing for the people who want to visit our downtown. The restrictions will be lifting with time, and we're already at stage 3. Soon everybody will be at capacity and will begin to heal. We're all together, and I hope we really think long and hard about the businesses you will hurt, not just the ones you will help. So that's basically my feelings on all of this. I hope that helps you. I just think that there's a lot of perspective that I think needs to go in, that there's a lot of businesses that aren't just restaurants, and there's a lot of businesses that aren't just, there's a lot of different types of businesses downtown. There's, I can't even count how many businesses are in different towers and things like that. And I think that there's, you're talking about giving back the liquor licenses, fees and stuff like that. And you kind of you look back into it, and I just think that there needs to be, all of Coeur d'Alene is hurting, and I think that this will just cause a lot. We've had a lot of change already, and I just think that we need to keep things as, consistent and comfortable as we possibly can for this next few months while we all just kind of adapt to a new normal. So I appreciate you listening to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lacey. Next one up.
Next, we have the NYC Piano Bar.
Mr. Piano Bar, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Are you going to sing? Are you going to sing your comment, or you could?
I could sing and play it if you'd like, but you won't be singing me. So
go ahead.
First of all, I do agree with what Lacey just said. And hello, City Council and Mr. Mayor. I'll read to you the email that I sent to Emily, and I'll try and keep it short because I know you guys got a lot on your schedule here. So I'd like to address the issue of possibly closing Sherman Avenue. We are very concerned about our citizens and COVID-19 issues. With this, we don't feel that closing Sherman Avenue will facilitate this in any way. In fact, this would probably encourage more groups of people to gather in one place. There are many issues that no one has spoke of relating to this possible closure, which would include a need for greater police presence on foot or horseback, especially at night. I have visited other cities that have closed their streets at certain times and seen firsthand an increase in crime and problems with open containers going from one venue to another and so on, and people just drinking in the street. Closing Sherman Avenue would cut down greatly the visibility of many venues that people visiting our nice city, and they wouldn't know where to go. There are a few venues that need more outside seating, but to benefit the few is not going to help the many. This proposal would benefit those few people, those few businesses, but would steer people away from the downtown area. And I talk to many people, and they say they do not want to walk blocks and blocks to get to venues, especially if the weather is bad. The parking garages are full. And as of June 15th, June 16th, the governor is going to lift his restrictions. So it'll be a non-issue in that case. I know that many of our guests complain about parking, and we're against this possible closure. Again, the few venues that want to extend out into the street, maybe you can just do something with that, or maybe have some more events downtown. But unless people are driven to come downtown, if you close off the street, it's a way of telling them, go elsewhere. So we are against this and don't see it as a positive thing for our city. Thank you for your time.
All right, I think that's it, Renata.
That's all on Zoom, correct, Chaz?
That is all the comments.
Okay, Hillary, thank you.
Great.
All right, well, good evening again. You've heard a lot about this proposal, so I'll go ahead and walk through some of the logistics on it and then staff's recommendation. So the decision before you tonight is, should council allow the expansion of downtown businesses onto sidewalks and portions of the street right-of-way this summer to help respond to COVID-19? And its staff is recommending the option B, which would leave Sherman Avenue open to traffic. So option A, and you've heard a lot about that, it would be to close Sherman Avenue from 2nd to 6th Streets to vehicular traffic. So the center lane would be open for pedestrians to be able to walk. It would also be available for emergency service vehicles and at times oversized vehicle route. It would allow businesses to expand onto the sidewalk and streets similar to the street fair. But it would also allow a combination of parklets and expansion onto the sidewalks. And it would, so on Sherman Avenue, that'd be the only place where vehicular traffic would be closed. The north-south streets would remain open. Any of the side streets that would want to participate, they would have the option of doing parklets or the sidewalk extensions with that pedestrian detour route. And the proposal under this is do it as soon as possible to help respond to COVID-19. So the goal for the group proposing this was starting in June and going through Labor Day. Option B would be to keep Sherman Avenue open to traffic and to allow businesses on all of the streets in downtown to have the option of parklets and the sidewalk extensions, which are really the raised pedestrian detours, which would allow the businesses to have additional seating on the sidewalk and then allow ADA sidewalk detours to go around, which would go out into the street next to the curb, similar to just a shrunken version of a parklet. So this would require the construction of parklets and those sidewalk extensions for all participating businesses, and because this would require more effort in constructing parklets and those sidewalk extensions, we thought more realistically it would start in July and go to Labor Day. So a little background on this. So it was in early May, we started getting calls and emails with varying ideas about this. You know, they've seen it across the country and across the globe, really, of communities that are looking at ways to allow businesses to expand outdoors to respond to COVID-19. And so we had some initial discussions, city staff and the Downtown Association, and thought because of the logistics of it, it might not work to do closing the street, but to look at evaluating parklets and having that be something that gets more formalized through the code and would start in spring of 2021. And so that was kind of where we left it initially. And then we started hearing from more businesses, including the proposal, the Rebound Downtown proposal that you've received from Jack Riggs. And so once we received that, we thought it was worth having a meeting. And so a few of us met and talked to the group that proposed this just to learn more, and thought it was worth finding out, do the downtown businesses even have an interest in this before we would come to council and give you any kind of proposals. And so as you've heard, there are mixed results. So the Rebound Downtown proposal is really, again, to allow the full street, Sherman Avenue, other than the north-south streets, to be used for the benefit of businesses and for the social distancing for public health. And so it is a little bit different than option B, because it truly would restrict all vehicular traffic other than the emergency vehicles. And it's a little bit more challenging, as we know. There's all the traffic that happens on Sherman Avenue and backs up. And so I think that's, the pros and cons of it is, yes, you probably would have a lot better social distancing and less exposure to COVID-19 if you could do that, but then you have the reality, which is why staff is proposing option B, because it really finds the balance between the businesses that aren't sure that they are ready to participate or don't have the capacity. So the parklet examples that we're proposing would not be in the shape of the Moontime one. That one is more like a diagonal parking space or two. The ones we're looking at would be more like a parallel vehicle. So on the left here, you can see the image where it's a parklet that just fits within the space of 1, 2, or more vehicles that would be parked up against the curb. And so it'd be a raised platform similar to the Moontime with a railing around it. The temporary sidewalk extension and pedestrian detour example, so this is one that we've seen in different places, and Councilmember Miller had suggested that we look at some other communities. This photo shows what that looks like. So it really just allows the businesses to expand their outside seating footprint onto the full sidewalk and then have this built up, and it would be built similar to a parklet, and that would be out on the street with a railing, and there would have to be the ADA provisions for that as well. So kind of looking at what's the performance analysis for this. So we know that the Moontime Parklet has worked well. It's been very popular. There's parklets all across the country. We actually already have in the revitalization plan, the draft revitalization plan for East Sherman, we want to add this to the city code to make it so that businesses in our districts throughout the city could do this where it's appropriate to have parklets built. And we're also talking about having it as an action item in the Envision Coeur d'Alene, so our comprehensive plan update, because it's something that is working in a lot of communities. So for that reason, we feel like option B is a win-win because it helps with COVID-19, but it also helps beyond our response to COVID. So other things on performance analysis, these are other communities that are looking at ways to help businesses by allowing the parklets. And so the list is included there and was in the staff report. So just looking at, we're used to having events in downtown. This is a list of the events where there are full or partial street closures. So Downtown Association is familiar with doing that. So if that was the goal of council, we could certainly pull it off, but there are going to be some impacts and some pains associated with closing the street. So we have received mixed responses. You have tonight, you have the full printout, I believe, of the emails and letters we've received. Very mixed. So some say close it all, and some say do nothing. Some say allow the parklets and the sidewalk extensions. And of course, you've seen in the media, we've had some write-ups as well. So I have included in this PowerPoint tonight the updated survey results. You did receive copies of that. And so it is just about 50% of the people are saying, yes, we should close Sherman Avenue. So there is a majority response. This is just Downtown Association members, so it's not all downtown businesses, just to be clear of that. And we had just about 50 people answered. So this one is, do you prefer the concept of parklets and or expanding sidewalk areas you can utilize? This one, it really, I think there's overwhelming support for parklets, expanded sidewalks, and then I like both concepts. So they couldn't, decide. If you like them all, then you'd group those three together and say, let's look at those as a package. It doesn't make sense for staff to say one or the other, because I think the parklet might work better for some businesses, whereas a sidewalk extension might be better for a retail establishment, for example. So this one is, if given the opportunity, would your business utilize expanded sidewalk usage parklet? So we did have on this one, it was close to 50% saying yes, my business would utilize it, others saying no. This was a question about should alcohol be allowed inside the parklets, and we gave a time frame of 10 p.m. That's just a recommendation that could change as well. This one, majority of people said yes with food. Others said yes, it's okay without food as well. This one was, would you like to see the concept of parklets and expanded sidewalk usage? And how long would you like to see it this summer, or would you like to see it long term? And actually, overwhelmingly, people liked both, but of course, they thought this should be beyond this summer, that this is really a great idea for Coeur d'Alene. So by business, this one shows on each of the streets where the survey respondents are located. And so overwhelmingly, it was people on Sherman Avenue that have businesses that responded. And so the blue is in favor, the orange is opposed, and then the gray is other. So they had kind of some mixed responses in there. So you can see that, again, it kind of varies. Obviously, it benefits the businesses most on Sherman Avenue. So that's why they're in favor. This is by business type. So again, the restaurants, the blue is the in favor of, so restaurants over retail favored it. But then surprisingly, we had several professional offices that wouldn't use it at all, that favored closing Sherman because they thought it could be beneficial for businesses and the community. And then this one is kind of the question again about the parklets and the expanded sidewalks. So again, the retail versus the restaurant and all the other uses. So favoring parklets, the retail, oh, this one actually, does that look right, Emily? That doesn't look quite right. So the restaurants were, the slide doesn't seem right, but I thought the restaurants overwhelmingly thought the parklets, and the retail that wanted to do it would want to do the sidewalk expansions because then they could keep kind of their merchandise closer to their building, which makes a lot more sense. This map, while it's a little hard to see, I tried to just pinpoint the businesses that expressed that they would be interested in participating in either a parklet or expanded sidewalk or both. So the red stars are the restaurants and bars, and the yellow are the retail. So you can kind of see the concentrations of them in a few of the areas. So this is between 2nd and 3rd Street on the south, the Resort Plaza shops. This one, the concentration is more on the north side between 3rd and 4th Street, up 4th Street, and then down east of 5th Street. And then this is a list of businesses that said they'd like to participate, just so you can kind of see the groupings of those for restaurants, bars on the left, and then retail businesses on the right. Crafted responded they'd only want to participate if Sherman was closed. And then All Things Irish indicated they would only participate if the street was closed as well, or if this was kind of forced on them, that they thought they'd have to compete by doing something outside. So some performance standards. So we thought when we met with the Downtown Association and some of the businesses that there needs to be some rules with this. There has to be mandatory compliance that's required and the ability to revoke privileges. So we would do one warning, and then beyond that, if they're not complying, the businesses would lose privileges to be in the parklets or in the expanded sidewalk area. Of course, police would probably want to do some additional patrolling. And then the hours of operation, again, staff is proposing 10 p.m. excuse me, for cutting off the service of alcohol, but that could be a different time. And then other things that are kind of best practices anyway, the owners would be responsible for locking up their furniture, bringing in their merchandise so that nothing would get stolen at night. And any of those costs, if they don't already have tables and chairs, that would be their cost. And then also, if we did have special events down there, we have at least 2 planned for the summer. They would have to remove the parklet and sidewalk extensions just to allow the event to function normally. Some other considerations are, if you support this option B or even option A, do you think it's important for those expanded areas to require that there's food service with the alcohol? And if so, is it snacks or is it full meals? And then do we want to allow any business that said they want to participate to do it? Or should we say, if you're not complying currently with social distancing, we're not going to give you a permit to do a parklet or expand your sidewalk seating because you're just going to make it worse. You're kind of going against the COVID-19 best practices. The hours of use is another thing. So are there certain hours where it should be shut off? And then if there's other things that council would like to consider. So some design specs, we've looked at other communities, and the 2 examples that I included in the packet were from City of Spokane and Idaho Falls. The Spokane one is really simple and easy to use. So this is looking at just a single vehicle space, parallel parked against the curb. And so it would be, so a parking space is generally 9 by 20. So it's, we'd want to make sure that the parklet doesn't extend as far out as a car. And so how they've done it in Spokane is it's 1 foot back. So it'd be 8 feet. 8 feet by 20 would basically be kind of the one car size. And then it would be 8 feet by 40 feet would basically be kind of your 2 car size. What they've also done is they have a 4 foot buffer on either end. So if cars are parked, they would have curb stops and then reflective bollards on those 2 ends to protect the parklet and the people in those. And same with for us if we're doing the sidewalk extensions, just to make it safer. So those would be the standards that we would be proposing, just so that it is a safe environment if there are cars parked in between the parklets. So the other thing on the temporary sidewalk extensions, because we couldn't find any other specs, we kind of talked through this. I talked to Chris Bosley and Ted Lancey to find out what should we require for that. And so we would have to meet ADA. And so as shown, it's the 42 to 48 inch width to make sure, especially on the corners, there'd be 48 inches for turning movement. For accessibility, we would have railings, and then there would be a cane sweep rail on the bottom, and that would also help with wheelchairs, just so that nobody can kind of go beyond it. And then making sure the walking surfaces are slip resistant, and then otherwise they'd follow the parklet construction standards to make sure it's at grade with the sidewalk and it's not sloped and causing a safety issue. So this is just an example of what those temporary ramps could look like. So I was talking about the sidewalk thing. This is the ramp. So we think probably on a few of the blocks, especially where there's a higher concentration of businesses that might participate, we would need a mid-block temporary ramp for ADA. And so this would be also constructed to these specs. There would be a little edge on the side, and then we would have some non-slip surfacing as well, and then meet the ADA grade. So financial analysis, so option A would be treated more like a special event where they're closing down the road. So the cost of that was $750 because it would be kind of a high impact event plus $1,000 security deposit. And then any of the parklet sidewalk extensions would be paid for by participating businesses. Option B, it wouldn't be the special event unless council wanted it to be treated as such. It would be that the businesses have to pay for, unless they can get it donated, the materials and the labor to build the parklets and the sidewalk extensions, and to contribute to the ramps for their block. If they are participating, that would just be participating businesses. If someone's not participating, they would not have to pay into that. Signage would be really, there's just some additional places we'd like to place some wayfinding signage to the public parking, and this would be under either option A or B, and then some smaller social distancing signs at the intersections and then on the parklets, just so it's more awareness, but those would be lower cost, and we could work with the Downtown Association on that. So staff's recommendation is option B, again, because it has less impact on the businesses that don't want to participate, and it allows the traffic to continue flowing. It would reduce some on-street parking spaces on Sherman Avenue, so that is an accurate statement, but the cost of doing a parklet, while I think if businesses probably could get some of the materials and the labor donated, which would help drop the cost, it could be $1,200, it could be $2,000. If you're doing a bigger parklet, it could be up to $5,000 to do one of these parklets. So I think the cost itself is going to be somewhat limiting for people that want to participate. The sidewalk extension is probably about half that cost because of it's about half the width that it would need to extend into the street, so the materials would be less. And then, of course, the businesses would have to supply their own tables and chairs. So if they don't already have that, they might say, is this worth it? They might say it is worth it because then they can have a few extra tables. They can continue to employ their staff and provide their services. So that is staff's recommendation. So it's your decision point tonight to decide if you'd like to expand businesses onto sidewalks and portions of the street this summer. And if you like some option A, B, some other variation, or if you'd like us to explore it further, or if you don't like any of the above. Just like to hear from you this evening. With that, I'd stand for questions.
All right.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, just Christy, before we get started, I just want to say that in full disclosure, I have businesses on Sherman. I did consult with Mike Gridley, and he said it was okay for me to participate in the discussion. So go ahead, Christy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hillary, I can't see in your staff report any consultation with police, fire, or streets, and maybe that's been done. But Mr. Mayor, all three of those department heads are here tonight. I would like to hear from them on their assessment on how this will impact their departments. Could we bring them up one at a time?
I think Kenny should start us off. I guess, Kenny, I think Christie's question was to talk about the impact. So we have a couple of options before us. We have option A, which is street closure, and then option B, which is the parklets. So kind of address fires issues with any of that.
3 words: access, access, access. That's our big concern with everything. And you got to figure the rig that is the most prevalent down there will be our ladder truck, and that's a very big piece of equipment. It's 18 feet wide with the outriggers out, 48 feet long. And downtown is one of our highest risk factors when you look at the density of people during the summer, plus the age of the buildings. And we've had catastrophic fires down there before. Our big thing is we have to be able to get that big truck down through the middle of town. We don't fight fire from the back. We always fight fire from the front. And we need a certain amount of space for us to be able to move that ladder to get to the tops of those. So that's the big thing with us. If there is access through the middle of the street, like what option A says, that's problematic to us a little bit, only because of 48-foot truck has a big swing. We have to have 25-foot internal, 50-foot external radius, which we have with the bulb outs now. But if we did come into the street, we would have to, kind of like we do with the street fair, and Mr. Cooper does a wonderful job, is he keeps stuff away from the corners so we can make those corners. So we would have to have around 21-ish feet down the center to assure that we could drive the truck and operate safely.
Any questions? Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kenny, when the block North 4th burned recently, and you know the area I'm talking about right across from the old courthouse.
Yes.
If there would have been parklets there occupying the parking spaces in front of that building, would you have been able to stage the same way you did without them?
Yes, I think we would. The only thing is we would have to move forward or back. And just how what we do tactically, if you will, is our ladder truck is our toolbox, and it ordinarily goes to the front of where the fire is, or to a corner because of where we're going to put the ladder. So it takes an enormous amount of space. Almost as important to me as how we're going to put that with the wideness of the outriggers is getting from the street into a building, even for a medical call. And we want, time is our enemy, so speed is important to us, so we have to be able to get from the front of a building into that residence for a medical call even very, very quickly. So one of the things that we talked about internally when we saw Hillary's discussion was our ability to have a clear path from the street to the building as well. So hopefully when they start setting up the tables, that's very important that we have that as well.
Any other council questions for Kenny? Thank you, Kenny. Appreciate it. Tim, do you want yourself or Chris? Either one. Okay.
Yeah, I think looking forward in, you have 2 options, and you're going to look at them. Obviously, closing Sherman is going to be a big challenge. I mean, Lakeside Avenue was not built to be able to take the amount of vehicles that would be traveling on it. There's no left turn, there's no turn bays on Lakeside where traffic would move off to the side and then cars would be able to impede. It's not insurmountable. It would just be, it would change the dynamics of the vehicles in the downtown. We found over time, many of our special events like Ironman, if you close Sherman down, there's always bottlenecks that we end up with. So 2nd Avenue and Lakeside doesn't have a signal, so we'd have to put up temporary 4-way stops. You look at Street Fair, with the north-south traffic still allowed to move, you've got to be able to lock down the street, or the pedestrians just walk right through those intersections. You have to be able to push them over to the crosswalks, or they just walk right out in traffic. They're oblivious. They believe everything's closed. And we've had issues with that where, working with Terry in the downtown, you would need patrol people to keep people, push them to the curbs, get them over onto the crosswalks. Over the years, I've had great work with PD and Eric Terrell. Him and I would have to deal with what kind of signage. If you went with A, we would have to make it one way, and it would be west to east, because that's the over height, over width route right now currently used by ITD. You know, so we would have to, we can control that to an extent. Like I told Hillary, you know, we can make them sit at port entry come later at night. You know, we have that ability to tell them when they can come through. But right now, ITD's kept it under 13 feet. You have to take the over height or an over width route of their vehicles. So right now, anything over 12.9 or 12.10 has got to go down Sherman until they get that bridge over Pennsylvania rebuilt. And then that won't be an issue. But any other questions for me?
Just one.
Oh, Kiki, go ahead.
So what about if Sherman were closed in the way that this is proposed based on other events, what's the impact to the surrounding neighborhoods? And does streets deal with that? The residential neighborhoods and that sort of thing?
Everything surrounding that downtown's very packed anyway, you know. I mean, the citizens, the people work downtown and, you know, looked at, okay, I can go park over at 5th in Indiana and I don't have to pay, you know, to park downtown and work downtown. It's going to have an impact, council member. I mean, but we have that impact a lot in the summer, like a couple of the people mentioned, including Hillary. That traffic backs up clear past Four Corners sometimes when things are really hopping and people are crossing Sherman and not obeying the crosswalk signs. They're just walking, and so traffic stops and it will back it up.
So to your recollection, on the event weekends last year when the parking garage was open, was there a decrease in that issue of residential complaints or backup in that area?
I would probably have to ask Mr. Cooper that. He would deal with more of the special event type, but we find a choke point on 4th Street. You know, if A was the option, we would have to put 4th Street to one way or one lane so we can control the traffic going through the intersection at 4th and Sherman. It'd just be one car at a time. And then same thing up through to Lakeside, and then it would open up. And you've got, during special events, traffic coming out of the new parking garage trying to get into that traffic to go north.
Okay.
Woody.
2 questions for you. So you go back, not quite to the 80s, but you remember the 80s and
The
90s.
80s.
This has come around before. We've talked about it. Things have changed, correct? From what you can remember when we looked at diverting and all the different ways to get people through town. What's your recollection of how we got there and why we did not?
I remember some conversation of closing Sherman, I don't know, 17, 18 years ago. There was some talk about it, and at that time, I know ITD had a significant issue with closing Sherman because that was a route that they maintained and controlled. And sometime right around 90, 91, 92, when we rebuilt Sherman and put the bulb outs in, and then we went up to Lakeside, we narrowed Lakeside down. And it, you know, to put wider sidewalks up through there. Not much, but we did, and, you know, it's gonna be a challenge. I mean, we have challenges every day, sir, you know, and we're good at figuring out how to get them done. It's just, to try option A so quickly, it's gonna take us a lot of time to work out all the bugs, if that's how you look at it, but, you know.
Front Street has changed?
Pardon me?
Front Street has changed. Wasn't that part of the plan at one time?
Yeah, we no longer have access to come to Second and down Front and out through there, which would make this a heck of a lot easier, but.
Thanks, Tim.
Kiki?
One more, sorry. You may know this, garbage service is at Alley on that whole corridor, but deliveries for food service and trucks still occurs down the middle of the road, right there, is that?
Some food service vehicles are too big to get into those alleys, or the drivers, are not as experienced getting down them. But you do see food service early in the morning on Sherman, but it can be all day on 4th Street. I mean, I see it all the time there on 4th.
Okay.
So Tim, I had a question. So over the weekend, Saturday, we experienced, I believe what Lacey said and what you've mentioned too, the backup on Northwest Boulevard. The one that I saw was backed up all the way to the mobile station, entering into downtown. If Sherman was closed and you were diverting traffic over onto Lakeside, which you say is a street that wasn't built to handle that kind of traffic, that just makes that problem even
I would
bigger.
anticipate it to be a bigger problem. It would be even more.
Okay, all right.
And, you can shoot darts all night, and that's not what I'm trying to, but we have a lot of big boats come down there. We're going to have to teach them how to get over onto 3rd Street and go straight down. I can remember one Ironman, there's like a 50-foot yacht tried to get down through there, and we had to back him clear back up to Four Corners to get him out of there because he couldn't make that bulb out corner at 3rd Street, 3rd and Lakeside.
Any other questions for Tim? All right, thank you. Chief White?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Personally, I think this is a really cool idea. I like the idea of it, both proposals, frankly, but professionally, we have a couple concerns with each of the proposals, so maybe I'll just go through these real quick. Tim did a fantastic job of explaining some of the concerns we'd have about traffic. Mr. Mayor, you just talked about the backup on traffic on Northwest all the way to the mobile station. We experienced that yesterday afternoon for some period of time. I'm with Tim Martin. I don't know that our streets are set up appropriately on Lakeside to handle the volume of traffic that we would displace off of Sherman. But I have a concern with the partial opening as well. We currently already see where the two-way traffic on Sherman oftentimes are crowding the center lane or crowding the center line just because of the parked vehicles off to the sides. They don't want to hit anything over there. And I have a little bit of a professional concern with placing vehicles that close to seated people at a restaurant or an outdoor, table or that sort of thing. I think our drivers are pretty cautious down there for the most part, but by the same token, we still see accidents on there on a pretty regular basis, cars bumping one another, trying to park and that sort of thing. And I would really, the outcome's a little bit different when you bump into a table full of people than it is when you bump into a parked car. So that's a little bit one of our concerns. The second concern we have is with regards to enforcement of the restrictions that are listed within the proposal. I will tell you that I do not have the staff to enforce those at this time for the summer months with regards to a lot of the kind of the code enforcement things that are written into the proposal. The third one, and Hillary and I have talked about this. Some of it has to deal with the types of restaurants and establishments that might be taking advantage of this program. I think in one part of the proposal there was some discussion about requiring food along with alcohol beverages. I would strongly urge you to define what food means. I guess what I'm saying is a bucket of chicken and wings surrounded by a table with 8 people on it for several hours drinking heavily is probably just going to contribute to the problem that we already have downtown with our bars. Our bar area is already takes up a huge amount of our resources, and to add to it without some additional restrictions of whatever you put in place would probably compound that issue just a little bit for us.
Council questions for Chief?
Thank you.
Appreciate that. So before we get back and ask questions of Hillary, the one thing that I want to keep in mind is that we continue to talk about downtown business being affected, but I think that if we, just my suggestion now, whatever we look at, I think we need to look at citywide. We have retail businesses, we have restaurants, we have all of this citywide, and I think that we just need to keep that in mind, that whatever we do should apply to the entire city. So, Hillary, come on up. They may have some more questions for you. Questions for Hillary Kiki?
Hillary, actually, this might be for Mr. Cooper back there. How many downtown businesses are in the association, or is everyone within that footprint a downtown business association member?
I will definitely defer to Mr. Cooper or Ms. Wood.
Mayor and council, within 22 blocks of downtown, everyone's included in the business improvement district. So that goes from Northwest Boulevard to 8th and from Front to the south side of Indiana.
So do you know approximately how many separate businesses there are in there?
Well, we take, and we also have professional office space folks that are involved in our category, but we're under about 225 total business people.
Okay, I guess I'm just trying to get a comparison of the responses we got to this, because I'd heard some professional offices said, you know, it may or may not affect them, they wouldn't use it, so they didn't respond to the survey. And so I'm just looking at, of the number of responses we had, how many does that represent of the entire business population that's within this footprint?
So our information is based on email addresses available.
Okay.
And that's how this was based on.
And so was the survey given to the 225 members or to the members between 2nd and 6th Street in the affected area?
It was given to anyone that we had as many email addresses
Okay.
as possible.
And we had approximately 50 responses? I think
Yes.
that's what we had? Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Terry. You have a question for Terry, Dan? Oh, Terry, you're not released yet.
Not free. Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Since I've been on council, this topic comes up often. This is not the first time people have said, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we shut down Sherman? And I think it would be cool. But being responsible and wanting all that accountability stuff, I've come to people like you, Steve Wilson at the Chamber, and I've asked you, what about shutting down Sherman? And it seems to me the consistent answer is always, it would kill downtown. Is that your experience, and what data do you have for that?
Well, Councilman Gookin, you're asking me, you know, Emily Boyd and myself, we represent all of the business downtown. And so we understand they came out of the winter when business is very slow in all types of business downtown. So, and then COVID-19. So everyone is struggling and they're very fragile. And so the concern is, what would a big change or a moderate change be, and how it would affect everybody? I don't have the answer. I think on the survey, it showed that retail had some concerns and restaurants were enthused about the concept. So I don't know if that helps you, Councilman Gookin. It's very difficult, and it's concerning as fragile as downtown is at this time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so more questions for Hillary? Woody?
Just a couple. So Hillary, this is COVID thing is just about downtown. As the mayor said, I guess I think out. I think up in Midtown and Appleway and all the places that there's other places that are affected, but this is COVID-related downtown. Is that kind
The
of the?
proposal before you tonight, especially proposal A, was just for downtown.
Okay.
I think proposal B could easily be modified because it's allowing the parklets and the sidewalk extension. So I think any of the business districts, we could work that in because we're already envisioning it for East Sherman. We already have one example down there. I think there's other businesses on East Sherman that could benefit. It's possible in Midtown, it might be an option. It'd be a challenge on the east side of 4th Street, for example, where there's no on-street parking. So it'd have to be where there is parking where we could accommodate a parklet or a sidewalk extension. I know the proposal, the rebound one, they did mention though that the concept could apply to Midtown or to Riverstone. For example, I think just the closing Sherman Avenue obviously is very specific to downtown, but I do think that the concepts could be much broader and beneficial. A lot of businesses in the community though may not have the same kind of frontage. So a business on US 95, for example, that may not work, but they might be able to expand into their parking lot or something, and that's allowed anyway. They could kind of do the special use permit event and handle it that way.
Okay. In regards to parklets, we did one up on East Sherman, was a sample test, and it's still there.
Right.
So parklets are permanent. Yes, whether they're used or not, they kind of stay there.
Well, that one has been a little bit interesting because we've been waiting to finalize the revitalization plan and decide, do we like how that block works, or are we going to do something different? Ideally, a parklet would be seasonal, and so it would be removed in the winter and stored, and then it would come back. And that one, just because it was kind of a pilot, we had volunteers build it. Moontime hasn't totally taken ownership yet until it becomes something that's legally allowed. And so we haven't asked them to store it. But I think that would be the goal is, yes, the parklets would be so they could be constructed and could be removed for special events and then removed in the winter and stored and then put back for the summer season.
So let's stay on parklets for a moment. 8 by 20 is kind of a single wide, I guess. And I'm trying to do the math for 6-foot spacing and trying to understand the investment for 2 tables or 3 tables. Right. It's not working. And cap fees for putting more tables on. There's some sewer fees that we just let go of, but that's the norm. Those are all the basic costs that go on with that, correct?
Correct. So a normal one would be an encroachment permit, so $125 for that, and then the cap fees for the wastewater for the seats. But as you said, if council waived that for already, then I think that would be applied to any of the parklets through this program.
Okay. So they don't become permanent, even though the one on East Sherman is.
Correct.
And he didn't pay any cap fees on that.
He did not, because we asked them to do it as part of the pilot project.
Okay.
But they did pay the encroachment permit.
So I guess my overall view is I can't see for the investment of the parklet making the economic difference in restaurants right now. But it seems to be pretty much about restaurants, and I get it. I know some people who do that for a living, and it's an interesting time, but I don't know if COVID's it seems to be the reason for everything right now, but, like, how long can we live on COVID, And is this going to be something that would be beneficial forevermore?
In my opinion, the parklets and the sidewalk extensions would be beneficial beyond COVID. That's why that's staff's recommendation, because right now with the spacing, the social distancing spacing, a small parklet might only fit 2 tables. A bigger one could fit as many as 5 tables. But once you don't have to space the tables 6 feet apart, you can actually get some more seats in there, more tables in there, and so it could be a lot more beneficial. And for a business like Moontime that doesn't have any outside seating, that's great. And clearly people love to sit outside in our summer months in Coeur d'Alene. So staff does feel like the option B has benefit beyond COVID-19.
Thank you.
Christie.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Hillary, this is not a critique. This is just me asking for, in the future, staff reports. I've asked for this in the past from other department heads. Please, always include something from public safety if it pertains to your staff report. It always feels like groups are working in silos, and it's so important for us to hear all of it. So that's not a critique, just a request. The second thing is, both proposals are problematic. I share the chief's comments of boy, it'd be really cool. What can we do? I would like to look beyond those two proposals to what about utilizing this plaza out in front of us for downtown businesses in the summer? Very inexpensive. They don't have to do parklets. They could expand out onto the plaza, just like they would for the downtown street fair. And then beyond that, other city-owned property throughout the city. So other businesses that are impacted with this would have the same ability. So those are some thoughts I wanted to add just for staff to think about if it would be feasible. And then if we're determined that this needs to be on the street in downtown Coeur d'Alene, I would be more in favor of some weekends rather than disrupting businesses all week long. And I don't know if that has been brought forward as a proposal, that maybe we give the option of shutting down on weekends. The parklets seem very expensive, as Woody has said. I don't know how anybody could get a return on their investment unless it was a long-term proposal like you're suggesting. But if we're just trying to help people out between now and September, that's a very expensive option. So I'm looking for other opportunities and other feedback other than just the two proposals before us.
Staff and Downtown Association did talk about doing just weekends or doing shorter amounts of time to close down Sherman Avenue, and that certainly is an option. It's just it requires more, you have the setup time, you have the takedown time, you have to kind of just mobilize over and over and over again, but that certainly is something that could be explored. The parklet thing, yes, there's definitely kind of that initial cost that might be cost prohibitive, and if council isn't interested in parklets beyond this summer and kind of the COVID-19 response, then that is something for businesses to be very aware of. But I think that the parklets are something I'd like to see in our community beyond this summer. And if there are businesses out there that are willing to either donate the materials for those or the labor, I think it could end up being really valuable. They could put a little placard that they donated and contributed to it. So, I mean, there's ways that community members want to help out, and so maybe that's a nice opportunity. We're seeing that in other locations.
Other questions for Hillary? I guess the ADA issue, I always think that it's easy for us that aren't in that position to throw out pictures of ramps and to do all those kind of things, which we're just trying to do the right thing for people that are in wheelchairs. But Blair Williams is a friend of a lot of us, and she wrote council a letter, and she talked about the challenges. And Blair knows. She lives it every day. And she talked about all the ADA challenges that could potentially be caused by all of this. And so that's one of the things I really think that we need to, we haven't done a lot of planning on that. We've done some, but we haven't done a lot. And Blair laid out a lot of those challenges. And so that's really a tough point that I think that we all need to think about. We still aren't perfect downtown by any means right now for ADA. So I think that that's something that council should take a look at too when we're looking at all of these proposals. Other questions for Hillary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a lot of things I'm kind of summing up here. What was this discussion around the one-way, the potential, did that come up, the potential one-way west to east?
Talked about it
Sherman.
initially with the Downtown Association, then I met with Tim and Chris today to kind of talk through the logistics of that. I think beyond this summer that could have great merit. I think it's something that the three of us said, this is going to take a lot of work. So if we were going to try and pull that off and to do it right, it's some of the questions you had in your email where you're saying, okay, we're going to have to resurface the road and do striping and do additional signage and, all of this, figuring out the lighting, the street lights, all of that. It's something that if council would like to look at that, I think that's something we should really explore and study and do it right. It's not something we can do quickly to respond to COVID-19, to say, let's just switch it all up and move traffic into one-way patterns. At least that's the three of us think that now. If council would prefer that option, we can certainly look into it further.
And I would. I think that is a great compromise idea that has a lot of merit in the future. But it does, my questions to you were that it does seem like it would entail a whole lot more detail than what we have time for. And I also think that option A for me is kind of off the table based on the obstacles that we've heard so far. I also think that I see two different things here with the parklet and the sidewalk extensions. I don't see that the parklets would be very appropriate in the downtown Sherman Avenue core, but they could be very valuable for restaurants, Midtown if they can work it out, East Sherman, other areas of town. I think they're two different animals, the way that the way that they're put together. But it would be great to be able to have that option for all of the city to be able to use that. I think the sidewalk extensions, from what you're saying, could solve current issues like the pedestrian traffic that we have right now that's interacting between the street furniture and the stanchions for the restaurants. It can allow for physical distancing, additional work without a step down for servers to try to get into a parklet or a huge expense to make that even. And it could be ongoing, something that could be removed in the winters. And it can be used by all businesses. It's even as far as being able to do a walk around. And I think it could be done pretty quickly and pretty inexpensively. So I guess where I'm going is probably trying to make a motion here about having staff put together an outline that would allow sidewalk extensions in the downtown core, additional sidewalk extensions or parklets in the rest of the city, and do follow-up work later for a one-way, and have that effective as soon as possible, early as mid-June for the additional expansion to services. That's where I'm at.
Sarah, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Mr. Mayor, I'll second it for discussion.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second. Kiki, maybe give a little bit more, just so it's a little clearer as to the motion so we can have some good discussion.
Renata, you didn't get all that? that rambling paragraph? She's so good at this.
We will see. All right, there was a lot going on there. So I have motion by Miller, seconded by Wood, to have staff put together a proposal for sidewalk extensions in the downtown core and parklet designs for other parts of the city and one-way traffic design for the future on Sherman Avenue.
She's amazing.
Tim, come on up.
If I could just really quickly, Mayor, just a reminder that you, as a governing body, authorized us to go look for a grant to do a bunch of signalization changes downtown, and we've got it in our budget. Today we're approaching about 100,000 out of the impact fees to work on this. So as we look at this one way, that's going to have some kind of effect to what we're working on, and I just want you aware of that. And Chris and I'll work to, I think we can move some of this stuff around onto Lakeside to potentially help this, but just so you're aware of that.
And Kiki, I think your motion is just to study it, right?
To study it, and it's, I don't think that it's possible for this year. That's not my intent at all. It's something that couldn't be done in detail. It would require too much effort. But I also think that there's enough citizens who've spoken out to say we need to look at Sherman Avenue again, and the one-way compromise was my idea of having staff pay attention to that request.
Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Kiki, your proposal is to just study things, or is there something you want to have happen before the end of the month?
I want staff to modify option B so that there's two separate physical items to be utilized by restaurants and businesses, so that the sidewalk, are we walking them, calling them extensions officially, sidewalk extensions be utilized in the downtown core, and then the extensions or parklets be used in any other portion of the city as soon as possible in the response to COVID, in order to get the distancing that we need and make that as simple and as easy as possible for all businesses who might be affected.
Go ahead,
so, Mr. Mayor, so here's the problem I have with that is when government does as soon as possible, it has a tendency to goof up. And I think there's a lot of stuff that we can do, and there's stuff that we have done, and there's a public process involved with that. There's a lot of steps involved. There's a lot of research. we already have staff that is our own staff is burdened by the COVID crisis. And they're already, we're starting to crawl back to direct staff and pull people off current projects to do this, especially when I don't think it's been vetted well enough, and I don't think we really have studied it enough. I'm okay with studying it in the future. I'm okay with returning to this and looking at it and doing workshops and getting feedback from the public and looking into our options, because like the chief said, it's cool, but I just don't think we want to devote energy to try to get this done in the time, it's always, when you're an independent contractor, you always say there's three ways you can have it. You can have it quick, you can have it good, or you can have it cheap. Pick any two. So if we're going to do it quick, it's either not going to be cheap or it's not going to be good. And if we're the city of excellence, I'm not going to tolerate that. I'm okay with looking at it in the future, coming back, having staff look at it. Hillary said that the parklet things are going to be in our new comp plan. So maybe that's what we fold this into, and then we look at it. But seriously, all the stuff that I've heard about Sherman Avenue is, that's the holy downtown. And if we mess with it and we mess with it wrong, it's going to be bad. And that's my fear.
Other discussion amongst council? Woody?
Along those lines, I'm thinking back in the 80s remember when Sherman got its bulbs out, and it was a big deal. And even then, we went through cycles where Sherman ate it. We went through different times that businesses were closed, they weren't making it, and I'm kind of along the same lines. I'm not real wild about the idea because of what's happened to Front Street and Lakeside, it's not really future. It doesn't appear that the past is telling us they changed things, that it would never come back. I think the comp plan is where it's got to be. It sounds like it's already there, and we're spending all this money on the comp plan, so they can dig in it. But I want to grasp it. It sounds like it's a cool idea, but I just don't see it working the way we are right now. We've confined our streets and stuff. Also, one last thing is I don't see the big business support. When you run the numbers and 50% of not everybody is buying into it. Restaurants want more seating, I get it. But that's who's mostly pushing this, So that's just my thoughts.
Go ahead, Kiki.
And I guess maybe I want to be clear as to what I'm envisioning that I'm saying, because I do use a lot of words and Renata puts them together. But what I'm talking about is if there was a time to try something, and whether it's, I'm with you on the not a lot of support. When you have 225 members and 50 of them respond and only half of them are in support of it, it's not a phenomenal amount of people. But that doesn't mean that it's not people who deserve to be listened to, and we have an opportunity to try something. So when I was trying to break it down to what's the simplest thing to do to try it at this particular time, listen to their request, and help people who are concerned about this social distancing have a better opportunity to enjoy downtown, the sidewalk walk-around piece downtown seemed to be the simplest, safest, least intrusive, and easiest to construct and install, as well as dismantle. So I'd looked at them before, and the examples of the towns that I had seen, they put them up for just a few months in the summer, and they're not mandatory. The restaurants that want them use them. The ones that don't. It solves the problem with, we already have had people come and testify that they can't get strollers and wheelchairs between the stanchions and the furniture. It's too tight. This allows the restaurant to push all the way to the curb solidly and to have an unobstructed path for a person with a dog or a wheelchair or whatever to go around and be ADA compliant. And so I looked at it as a way to say those people are going to get the separation they need. We're going to solve some pedestrian traffic flow. It's a low cost to the owner who has to install that, and it's a low impact to the city. There's virtually none except for the permit and the drafting of that piece of it. So with a whole bunch of more words said, that was my reason to make a motion to say, if we want to try something for this, there's the one thing we can do. that answers this need. Now, the soonest possible, I mentioned mid-June because part of this work on the sidewalk extensions has already been looked at, already been done with already input on them. So another month worth of drafting how that would look could be responsive enough to some of the people who had the COVID concerns for this summer. So that was where I was going with the motion. I separated out the parklet because of the public safety, the extensive costs, the additional, problems for it being more traffic from the retailer or the restaurant going across the sidewalk to the parklet to serve their food or to look at their merchandise or whatever that might be. So that's why I went, that would be appropriate on East Sherman where they don't have a huge amount of daily pedestrian traffic. But on downtown Sherman, not so much. So that's a deeper explanation of what I'm looking at. So I'm not sure if my adding the one-way to it added too much of a confusion to it, or if it just seemed a lot simpler in my mind. But to try a sidewalk extension to go around a retailer or a restaurant at their expense at this time felt like it wasn't going to be as huge of a burden on staff to put up outline on how that permit would work. And it should be called a physical distancing permit. So it's not and it's something that could be tested and tried for in the future this year. Food and all of those kinds of things, adding to those restaurants is something that you'd have to rely on Chief White and other experts to draft part of that. But that's where I'm going with it.
Amy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I want to thank Hillary. I spent a lot of time on the phone asking an extensive list of questions to Hillary today, so thank you. And I have a couple more, if you don't mind. Along with what Kiki was saying, my questions are going to be about the sidewalk extensions. But one thing, first, I want to say...
Just a second, Amy. Could you put a picture up? Do you have a picture that we could put, so we all could see that?
And while she's looking for the picture, I want to say I love all the creative ideas and response to our current crazy time. The underlying struggle that I'm having with both proposals, and now the third proposal, is the unintended consequences on some of the retail businesses who are struggling. I don't think anyone knows. I reached out to numerous downtown businesses this weekend and talked to several of the shop owners, and it's unknown. Some of them are doing better than others. I mean, some of them are just within days of having to close their doors permanently. And the thought of impacting them negatively, unintentionally, I mean, just frightens me, right? That's not what we intend to do or want to do. So my question, back to our sidewalk extension, can you explain how that impacts parking in front of the business?
So it would impact it right in front of the business, but it would only be the businesses that want to participate would have that in front of them. So it would be, in this case, so it goes slightly beyond where the seating area has been expanded. So we would have to limit their seating area so that this sidewalk extension doesn't impact the entrances to other businesses would be the benefit to doing that. And then, of course, people could still come off of the street. And I think the point that Councilmember Miller raised, for downtown, this could be, while I like to see both options, I think for downtown this could be a little bit safer because it is about half the width of a parklet. So it's not going to extend as far out into the street from the curb as the parklet would. And so it would probably be a little bit easier, but it would still take up at least one parking space in terms of the length of it to be able to get around and make that turn movement kind of at the end. We could also, for multiple businesses that would want to participate, we could also work on figuring out how to do maybe a combined one that would wrap around and then still have breaks through so that people could get in if they needed to go into the restroom or go inside of the business. So we could figure out ways to do that might save cost, and rather than, because I think that was the concern that Blair had, was if you're having to do this and kind of weave back and forth multiple times, it's going to be very difficult to navigate. But if we can look at it, kind of field fit it, and look at the ones that want to participate, we could identify where maybe it makes sense just to join forces and build it together.
So currently we don't have an idea on how many businesses would want to participate with this model.
We do, I didn't break it down specifically, but the survey responses do. I don't know if Emily dove into that, but I think most of them said they would like to do one or both options. I think the retailers tended to like the sidewalk extension better because their merchandise was right next to the store. It'd be easier to keep an eye on it. I think the restaurants were fine with either option because for them, yes, your server might have to play Frogger to kind of get across the sidewalk, but then it does give kind of a separate seating area. So I think either way. In talking to the Dolls, they don't currently actually have this option. We thought that they did, but I've been talking to their community development director, and so they're very interested in this, and they're exploring the same exact thing to allow sidewalk extensions. And they had said some of the benefits they saw were that it can get the extended sidewalk area for the retail or the restaurants to be closer to the building, which helps with shade and wind, as well as the other components that are easier for servers and the retailers.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, Amy? Christy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, Hillary, well, first, Kiki, first of all, I commend you for trying to come up with a solution. You really are trying. It's a totally different proposal than what you've brought, so I have no idea if the downtown business would be interested. Also, I don't think we've cured any of the problems that were brought forward to us by fire that would have emergency medical issues and they need to get into the building. They don't need to go through a whole bunch of people to get into the building. Police, who still has to deal with cars coming up and trying to park where pedestrians are. I think those are serious concerns, and so I can't buy onto this option either. I think what Dan said and what Woody have said is we're going to have to spend more time on this. I don't want to be the one that says no to people that are struggling, their businesses, they want to have more customers. But if we look at the whole health of everyone, we have to spend more time on it and get it right, as Dan has suggested. Just my feedback. Kiki.
Any further discussion? Dan?
Well, our prime concern is the safety, and from what I've heard from fire, police, and with our street department, I mean, there's no question, like Kiki said, I mean, the option A, given that, is off the table. I mean, we cannot restrict, I mean, just the concept of, okay, we're going to take all of the traffic now that runs on the Sherman and Front and Lakeside, and we're going to divert half of it to the two smaller streets. I mean, that won't work. So that's, that's, I think, the main thing we got to keep in mind. Also, as far as this particular motion, I'm not wild about having different, treating, the downtown core one way and the rest of it another, but, the sidewalk extension is intriguing, and again, like everybody's saying, I think we need more time on that. But public safety is where we've got to look.
Okay. Any other discussion? So we have the motion. Just read that motion, if you would, please, Renata, one more time so we know what that is.
Sure. Motion by Miller, seconded by Wood, to have staff put together a proposal for sidewalk extensions in the downtown core and a parklet design for other parts of the city, and to study the one-way traffic design for the future of Sherman Avenue. On Sherman Avenue, sorry.
Okay. All those in favor? Opposed?
Aye. Aye.
Okay. So in this discussion, it appears to me that council feels that we just need more time. It seems like there's so many issues, there's safety, public safety issues, there's traffic issues, there's ADA issues, there's economic effect issues. So there's just a lot of unanswered questions. So I don't know that there is any solution that we have tonight. We'd love to have a solution, but I don't think we have one, other than asking staff to go back and just give us a thorough study so we can have all of those questions answered. Unless someone has different ideas. Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I concur entirely. And so I would make a motion that we table this item to a date uncertain.
Oh, I'll second that.
Motion to table. Any further discussion? Go ahead, Kiki.
My comment would be that I think we do have an opportunity to help these businesses during this time, and to table it to a date uncertain doesn't seem fair based on their request. So I probably won't go along with that.
Dan?
And I would like to reply to Kiki and say, we did earlier this evening waive the outdoor seating fees, the cap fees. And I believe that was a major, tip of a hat to us to thank the businesses, and it is something that we can do and do rather easily. I know it's going to impact our budget, but I think we did that earlier to show our support for these businesses. If there was something else along those lines, other fees or things that we could do that would involve a whole heck of a lot of staff time or impact us in any other ways, we should look at those as well. This just needs more cooking, and I want to do it right. We do so much right and good, and you heard people talk about various projects that the city has done and continues to do, and the way that those have really shined, especially Atlas, is that the massive amount of public involvement, public feedback, and time we took to make sure that we did all the things right. And if we're going to do it to this, let's do it in the same way and show that respect. I understand there's a sense of urgency. Like Amy said, I just don't want to do something that's going to turn out bad.
Kiki?
Would you consider modifying your motion to reconsider it as a portion of the comp plan rather than to a date uncertain?
I believe it's the relevant parts are already in the comp plan, so I think we're good there. That's what I gathered from Hillary.
All of the details of what we've talked about, including, are going to be discussed in there.
We could certainly modify that. So currently, as drafted, the one action item is specific to parklets, but we could add expanded sidewalks, and if council would like us to study the one-way street option for downtown as well, we could include that in the Envision Coeur d'Alene.
So Dan, did you want to?
No.
Adjust what you want to say? Okay, so Christie.
Mr. Mayor, and meanwhile, I would really be open to us doing what we can for businesses throughout the summer, allowing them to have some events at McEwen or on the plaza where they can hopefully recover some of those dollars. Retail stores, for example. I don't know what we can do for restaurants. We certainly couldn't do that for bars. But I would ask them to be creative that way and utilize some of our public space.
Woody?
Well, we can't save the world as much as we would love to, and there's certain limitations. And I'm sorry about Sherman Avenue. It's just been spun so many times for so many years, and it's just not the same. I'm having a hard time just even wanting to go down that path. I don't want you spending your time. I don't want to spend money if it's just going to keep spinning. I mean, somebody can always come up with a better way of doing things, but this is a major street, it hasn't changed much in the years. Back in the diagonal days, believe it or not, that was cool. I don't want to lose parking, I don't want to give up all the things that have been developed since we started Sherman Avenue, the 80s, when they did the bulb outs and made it cool and made trees and all the things that we didn't have back in the old days. And I just don't think it's probably worth the effort and the time and the energy. And these folks that are scrambling, I get it. You know what? Put your head down, take care of your customers. That's how you survive in the real world. You take care of what you can, you do a good job, and people will take care of you. I'd like to think we could save the world, but I just don't think this is worth the time and energy to chase it around. There's so many other things that we could be chasing and pursuing and fixing than something that's been spun so many times. I don't mean to sound old guy going history.
I want to bring
history.
diagonal
We're
parking
supposed to
back.
learn from our history. Yeah. Oh, that's right. Thank you.
All right, any further discussion? So the motion on the table is to table this item to a time uncertain. That's the motion, okay? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
So that motion carries. So now there is one person that's going to need at least a 5-minute recess. So let's give ourselves let's say 7 minutes. Let's give ourselves a 7-minute recess and we'll be back. So we're in recess.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we are back in session. Next item is approval to include Lakeside Real Estate Holdings LLC properties, commonly known as the Roy Armstrong property, in the city's comprehensive plan update. Hillary.
Okay, well, good evening once again. So there we go. This item is for your consideration this evening. So we have been approached by the property owner who purchased the formerly owned property by Roy Armstrong. It's 1,100 acres. It's west of the city limits, north of I-90, and it's straddling Hutter Road. So they have approached the city to ask that we include all of the property in our comprehensive plan update analysis, which is being done through our Envision Coeur d'Alene project. So currently about half of the property is within our study area. It is included in our current comprehensive plan, our 2007 to 2027 plan. And they're asking that the full property be included in the analysis, and the timing is actually ideal from the city's perspective. So a little bit about the Envision Coeur d'Alene project. That is the collaboration between City of Coeur d'Alene and CDA 2030. We're updating our comprehensive plan, which is our 20-year plan for growth of the community. And so that needs to include your boundaries. The comprehensive plan currently looks at our ACI, but we have the ability to look beyond. And the ACI is area of city impact. And so we've been working with CDA 2030, and we've hired MIG as our lead consultant, and then they have a couple of sub-consultants. So they have traffic firm and economic development firm that are helping them. And so we've been working on doing all the community engagement right now, in addition to doing kind of looking at goals, objectives, and action items. We're actually working on some land use modeling as well. And that will then be looked at by the traffic consultant to kind of analyze what are the impacts of these different growth scenarios and what are mitigation strategies for that. And so the timing would be ideal to include the full property instead of just half of it, so that we can analyze the impact, so that council in the future can decide, do you want to annex this into the city? And so that's really the ask this evening. So the Envision Coeur d'Alene project is on track. We had a little bit of slowdown with COVID-19, but it's actually moving along quite well, thankful for technology like Zoom. And so we're looking at completion by the end of this year, so December 2020 or early 2021. So some of the history, so as I mentioned, this Lakeside Capital Group acquired the property, and so they have been meeting with City of Coeur d'Alene and City of Post Falls and the school districts in both communities and Kootenai Metropolitan Planning Organization, just to find out what are the things they need to be aware of. They've been doing a lot of master planning efforts to study the area and see how it should be designed, see the right mix of land uses, evaluate on their own the impacts to traffic, wastewater, water, all of those things. And so really just kind of looking at, from City of Coeur d'Alene's perspective, it would be easier for them if they were to develop in one jurisdiction instead of two. That was outlined in the letter. So if you were a developer and you could choose your path forward, it would be really nice to choose, let's just work with one city instead of having two annexation agreements, two sets of fees, two building permit processes, all the different codes and regulations that they'd have to follow. And so those are a lot of the reasons that they had expressed. And it's kind of, to have just half of it in one city has its own challenges. So that's really the ask of having the whole thing looked at in our comprehensive plan. So as you can see on this screen, the area that's kind of this light peach is the Atlas Prairie designation in our current comprehensive plan. And so that's about 500 acres. This little hole in the middle is still owned by Roy Armstrong. And then this is the additional acreage in blue that's not currently in our city's comprehensive plan. And so they're asking that the full acreage, the 1,100 acres, be included. Oops, let me go back one.
Can I ask a question here? So
of course.
We are across Hutter?
It would cross Hutter, yep.
That is Post Falls,
This
correct?
It's not within the city of Post Falls.
Okay, but as I recall, at least again, my history is sewer. Access to sewer is what the whole game is all about, water and sewer. Well, we got water out there. I thought the sewer had to go to Post Falls.
It does not have to, and in fact, because I had worked for City of Post Falls before coming to City of Coeur d'Alene, and so we'd had discussions, and Connie Kruger, who was the consultant for the property owner, was involved in that because she had worked for City of Hayden. So we'd had conversations about the current ACI boundaries, and did they even make sense because of kind of the topography, the geography, like how does it make sense for wastewater? So at a point in the past, they'd kind of just drawn the lines where they thought it made sense based on road alignments, but it doesn't necessarily make the best sense for infrastructure. And so that's something that was even discussed at that time, that maybe we should look at how the boundaries should be drawn, and then also the Hutter bypass, you know, the alignment through that, should that be a dividing line? So there's a lot of things that have been discussed over the years. And so wastewater is something that the property owner and their consultants have looked at and have met with our wastewater department to say, could this be handled by City of Coeur d'Alene? And it looks like preliminarily, yes, it could, but we need to do some modeling to look at that. But just how the topography and how it drains, it would actually, in some ways, be easier to serve it in City of Coeur d'Alene than in Post Falls, because Post Falls, their whole system, they don't do gravity feed. So they're having to do all these, you know, pumps and lift stations all the way along, whereas most of ours were able to do the gravity flow. So there would have to be some upgrades, as noted in the staff report, but
so I guess
it's something that's feasible for sure.
So the question is over the last many years, that's always been the line of demarcation, you know, that's as far as we ever considered the volume, the amount of stuff that the sewer would have to do, the amount of water they'd have to pump. So it's like I'm looking at this huge parcel that possibly could become into the city in the future. And then, okay, it just kind of, wow, I've never seen that before, never heard it. I'd always heard the reason why Hutter was the dividing line, you know. So now we're going to spend our money on their dirt that is across the line as we stand today. Is that correct?
So my proposal is that they would pay any increased cost to analyze it. So it makes sense because we weren't anticipating looking at the full 1,100 acres. We were just going to look at half of it,
right,
that they would pick up the additional cost for the land use modeling, the traffic analysis, and then wastewater, and possibly looking at water, just to see how things might change if the whole thing were annexed in the future. So again, this is all just looking kind of in the future. So for our comprehensive plan, you may never annex land that's within your ACI, but you might. And so the state requires that we look at it. And this area doesn't have to be in our area of city impact to be in our comprehensive plan. So that's something that the state allows us to do, and that's why we're being asked to look at it now, because the timing is right now. And then all parties in the future can look at it again and say, does it make sense to annex it or not? But right now, the ask is, if we can include it in the comprehensive plan, the additional cost will be, the property owner will cover those costs so that it's not impacting the city, and it won't slow down our process, because the timing is, it's like right on track for our timing, which is ideal.
Okay, and so the game, we played the game a lot, you know, the comp plan game, and that was the last dirt in our city, right there. Well, does it get a shopping center? Does it get a gas station? What's the impact on, you know, all those things that we played the game with, and then now I'm looking at it as twice as big. It's just like, and that's country out there. I know, that's like a mountain, right? Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. So this is the area that's on the east side of Hutter that's currently in our 2007-2027 plan. So this is that Atlas Prairie tomorrow. And this really describes kind of the future of that area, which is consistent with what we've seen from the property owner and the consultant team. And so looking at an overall density approaching 4 to 5 units per acre with pockets of higher density, and multifamily units are appropriate and compatible areas that we would have to be careful in our evaluation of infrastructure needs with annexation, which would be why we're doing this. Open space, parks, pedestrian, and bicycle connections will be provided. The development adjacent to the ACI will provide for a distinctive entrance into the city. So that was one of the questions when we met with the property owner and their consultants was, well, how is this going to work if you're in two cities and you have the same project name? And are you living in one community and you just have the same name and it's Post Falls versus Coeur d'Alene? And how do you make them look distinct? And so those were some of the conversations that were had. Neighborhood service nodes, so that neighborhood commercial we've talked about, and then making sure there's the interconnected street network, and then making sure that the Hutter bypass is evaluated. So some of the history, I already mentioned this, that their group has really been diligent in meeting with both cities, with both school districts, and with KMPO, just to kind of look at their options, and then they've been doing a lot of behind the scenes work as well. After the last meeting, their consultant inquired about annexing the full property into the city and what that would look like. So they're not coming to you tonight with an ask for annexation, but really just could we analyze it in the comprehensive plan so that we all understand, is this something that makes sense for the city and for the property owner? And so now is the time to do that. And so based on that, they did submit the letter of intent to us, which is why I'm here before you this evening. And the reasons they cited were, the top one was really the sewer infrastructure. They think that that is a better strategy, is to come to Coeur d'Alene with all of the property, that it's probably more cost effective and makes more sense. Yes, we would require some upgrades likely, and that's what we've heard from the wastewater department, and that would be really evaluated during the wastewater modeling and analysis. They also want to have one community with a sense of place and kind of a vision for just one area where people know that they live in just one city. So the things I talked about before. And then also, it's a lot easier just to work within one jurisdiction for your permits in the process than two. So those are the big things. Lastly, they cited, so they do have some areas that are more mixed use and commercial. And so if they were to split their property between two cities, they've indicated that, well, it'd be more fair if they were to bring it all into one community, because then that community would be able to get the benefit of the additional increased taxes and property values versus trying to split it out, and then it's not really very fair. So performance analysis, as I mentioned, so we are in process with the land use modeling. Next would be the traffic analysis, and so the timing really is ideal. And I already mentioned the state statutes that allows us to do this thing for them. I already talked about the wastewater department, but we do have, I think Blake is still here, so if you had any specific questions to that. And then water had indicated that there might be some modeling required for that too. It's currently served by Ross Point Water District to the west of Hutter, but it's possible with the Hutter bypass that some of that might change for redistricting. It's possible too that water district might not want to serve it, and it would be easier for City of Coeur d'Alene if we served it, had water and wastewater. That's a lot easier for us to manage. And then, as I mentioned before, there would be a cost to do the analysis, and I am proposing that the property owner would pick up that tab. So for Envision Coeur d'Alene, the cost would be between $11,000 and $17,000, and that's the land use and the traffic component. And then there would be the additional modeling for the sewer and possibly water. So with that, the decision point for you and the recommendation from staff is that City Council should approve the inclusion of the full 1,100 acres of property owned by Lakeside Real Estate Holdings, LLC, in the city's comprehensive plan update process, which is Envision Coeur d'Alene, and have the property owner pay the cost of analyses and modeling required to analyze the additional 500 plus acres west of Hutter Road. With that, I'd stand for questions, and we do have the consultants for the property owner are both here this evening.
So just to clarify, Hillary, this is no decision whatsoever on land use, right? This is nothing to do with that. All it is to include this area in your comprehensive plan to be studied.
That's correct. So the comprehensive plan, so we would take for the consultant team, we would take what we've seen from them, kind of some conceptual vision of how they'd like to see it develop. So that'd be looked at. And then there would be some other land use alternatives that we could look at for the modeling, and then that would be run through the traffic. But this, by no way, if council approves this tonight, this decision, this doesn't bind you to agree to annex all of the property in the future. So just keep that in mind. They're totally separate. This is really just, let's analyze it because that's best practices and the state requires it.
Woody?
So does this cover the sewer modeling and the water modeling? You're showing that as us and JUB or a consultant. That's
Right.
not included in there?
They would pay for it, but I didn't know the cost of that. So that's,
Okay.
yeah. So they've already been talking to JUB about doing the wastewater modeling, and they would coordinate with the city.
Seems fair.
Wastewater
Right.
department, right. And then water, same thing. So that's determined, I think, by our consultant and city staff. I don't know how that modeling, the cost figure, but I did have specifically at least the cost for our Envision Coeur d'Alene.
Any other questions? Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hillary, how many people are we talking when this is said and done?
For number of units?
Or whatever?
Or just people? Yeah, that's something I would probably need the consultant team that's here on behalf of the owner to respond to that, but it sounds like it's below that 4 to 5 units per acre average. So if you're looking at 1,100 acres, so I think it would be.
Well, where I'm going with this is our wastewater treatment plant has a maximum capacity.
Correct.
And, yes, you may come forward, Mr. Anderson. And if I understand correctly, that maximum capacity is about 80,000 people?
Well, we don't rate it by people, but we rate it
Flushes,
by
whatever.
gallons. So, I mean, there's pinch points within the treatment plant. If you're referring to the treatment plant itself, not the collection system. But on the plant, our pinch point right now is probably 5 million gallons in our newly developed tertiary membrane system. That's probably our bottleneck at the moment.
So, and I know I might be jumping the gun here, but we are talking wastewater and, you know, modeling and stuff like that. So I guess this is okay with you that we can handle whatever it is they want to put out there. And I know this is a proposal, but things do change.
Certainly. So, yeah, there's no way that this would come in, I would say, and not impact wastewater.
Right.
It most certainly would. So would require them to model it in our collection system, and then obviously we would need to work within the treatment plant as well to see if any upgrades would be needed in there as well.
And who would pay for those?
For the modeling, the consultant would pay for it, not the current rate payers.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Christie.
Mr. Mayor, it just sounds like good planning. We're not locked into anything, no proposal for annexation, just planning. And I think that was the whole point of the comprehensive plan, so it seems non-controversial to me.
Okay. Any other questions from council? If not, we'd be looking for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd make that motion. I had my glasses on. Approval to include Lakeside Real Estate Holdings LLC properties, commonly known as the Roy Armstrong property, in the city's comprehensive plan update, envision Coeur d'Alene.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Mr. Mayor, if I may clarify for your motion that they would pay for the cost of the additional modeling?
Thank you.
Okay,
I'll add that to my motion.
Make sure.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Hillary. Next up, we've been waiting for this for a few weeks now. So it is the Fireboat Garage at 3rd Street, Mooringdale. Known as Fire Station 5, authorization for the use of impact fees for the construction and authority to move forward with bids. Lucas Pichette.
Live from
Live.
Berlin.
Evening, Mayor and
Deputy Fire
Council. Give me a real quick sec to work out the tech.
We can hear you.
Can you?
Yes.
And see you.
That's key. I feel like that's really important. And it's going again. Stand by here. Where did you send me last time? Yeah, it disappeared.
We went, oh yeah, here, let's hit escape. And down on this one.
Yeah, that's right.
It's so odd though, because it was still open.
I appreciate that.
No problem. But,
Can I just
does
go
that
here?
make sense? No, because you're,
Okay, so
I
just.
wonder if it's, hold on a second, let's.
Yeah.
Sorry for technical difficulties. It's on my desktop, so that's
Yeah.
so weird. Let us do this,
know,
come on.
Have done, you practice, come on.
Technical difficulties follow me. They just follow me.
Thanks for hanging in there, Hillary.
I know, what, why won't
It's
I
right
not
there.
do
Oh, it's
this?
right there.
Okay,
Yep,
all right.
perfect. We got
I'm gonna
it.
do it this time.
All right.
See, teamwork.
We are up and running.
Oh, there we go. Wow. Finally.
That is our
Looking
fireboat. So, I am here to propose an exciting opportunity. Currently, we have our fireboat. Its home is inside the leftmost slip there at Kootenai County's boathouse, and that is no longer going to be available to us here very shortly. So, after looking into all possible locations and just kind of grinding out all options, we have found a pretty clear choice, and with the help of Bill Greenwood, who has been a huge help, we have a great plan at the 3rd Street public boat launch there, as you can see. Hopefully you can see that pretty well. So this is an artist's rendition of how it will look, and he says it's pretty much going to be that size. So what you're looking at is how it's going to look. and it doesn't block views. It fits in really well with the surroundings, but most importantly, it's centered really nicely to take care of all responses to marinas, Tubbs Hill, and all the surrounding emergencies that we may face in that area. Additionally, this location will reduce our response times. I don't have actual numbers of how much that will reduce, but it will clearly reduce them. And per Miller, and let me run through some more of these pictures so you guys can see from other angles. So, per Miller and Stauffer, the estimate for completing the project is approximately $220,000, and I would be asking for that budget authority of $250 just in case there's unforeseen costs. In addition to that, I would be asking for permission to enter into bidding. And the timeline for that, as long as everything's run smooth, should be October 1st or before for completion.
And Luke, the cost of it, you're asking for up to $250, and you're going to pay for that out of your impact fees, of which currently has a balance of $283. Is that correct?
Perfect.
All right, questions for Luke? Dan?
Mr. Mayor, I have a question for Mr. Tymeson on the impact fees. So is this just fire's portion of impact fees that we're talking about?
Absolutely correct.
Okay, because I would know we made an obligation for a traffic signal at Ramsey and Wilbur, and my impression was that we were granting like a huge chunk of money, so we're going to be able to afford this, right?
From fire impact fees as station number 5, yes, sir.
Perfect, thank you.
Any other questions? If there are no other questions, we'll be looking for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I would move to authorize the use of impact fees for the construction and authority to move forward with the bids for the fire boat garage at the 3rd Street Mooring Dock, to be known as Fire Station 5.
I'll second that.
Motion and second. Any further discussion?
Station 5. Fire Station 5, really?
Roll call, please, Renata.
English,
Yes.
Wood,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
McEvers,
Yes.
Gookin.
Yes.
Motion carried. Then we'll finish the night with the authority for the drainage utility to purchase a heated storage facility from the water utility for $46,000 from Tim Martin.
Okay, so,
It just expands it, just this little guy.
so thank you, Mayor, Council. Looking for a decision tonight. We have an opportunity. Water Department had come to the drainage utility and asked if there was any interest in that two-door green building there on site of the general fund area of our campus. This is something that Terry and Kyle put together I think it's about 7-8 years ago. We visited with our comptroller to look at what the appreciated value was of this building. Vonnie did some crunching numbers and told me it was $42,200. Terry and I, along with Kim and Kyle, looked at the building, and they've done a couple additions on the inside. Sorry, my pictures aren't very good, but they've added heat to this building since it was built, and they've also got garage door openers in it, along with some mezzanines that Terry is not going to take with him when they move up to the property on Howard. This will allow the drainage utility to store some key equipment inside during the winter months, where in years past they've partnered with us. We've had to go off-site to store like our paint truck and things like that that can't be out in the winter. We'll be able to store a sweeper and or a jet vector truck, things like that, that during the winter months, if we have the big Chinook winds come in and rains, that we can respond to flooding around town. It makes sense that we have this option on site. And as we look into our 5-year, 10-year vision, you'll probably see more of this type of stuff that we can store equipment out of the weather. Kim has done a great job in purchasing equipment and upgrading equipment over the last 3 or 4 years, and you now have, some pretty expensive assets that we'll be able to get underneath some cover. So with that, my decision is asking for authorization to move forward and enter into an agreement with Water to purchase this for $46,000.
Woody?
So budget?
Pardon me?
Is this budgeted?
It is not in the budget, but we have dollars in that drainage utility budget to cover it.
How come the water department isn't donating it to the drainage department? I mean, that sounds ridiculous, but it's really not. They're both in the water business, right?
I understand that.
Okay.
We did some dickering and Terry's helped us out lots of times over the years, and he's looking to try to recover some of his costs for his fee payers. And
Troy?
Mr. Mayor, if I may, Councilmember, that's a great question. These are enterprise funds, the drainage utility and the water fund, so they're fee for service, and so they control their individual assets. I would anticipate, Council and Mayor, that you will see a proposal come forward from the water department to build a new storage building at their facility, and it will be in the cost range of about 40-some or 50-some thousand dollars. So we thought it was a natural way to recoup a great asset that sits on land owned by the general fund and simultaneously free up some dollars from the drainage utility to build a new shed for water.
So along those lines, if I may, are they gonna sell us their old building, their office building?
The water utility has done full-blown appraisals on that, and thanks to looking at who owns the land, the value doesn't go up very much for a triple wide. So this is one of the ways in which I don't think the triple wide office will be paid for by anyone based on its depreciated value. So this would be one of the ways in which we're helping water transition from the space they're at to their new one by getting them dollars for this building.
I would anticipate that there's probably going to be a lot of questions about building another water building storage facility, but that will be for another day.
Yes.
I see a couple of head shakings. So anyway, back to this topic here. Any other questions for Tim on this? Dan?
Well, actually, I don't have a question for Tim, but I'd like to make a motion.
Okay.
I'd like to move that we approve the drainage utility to purchase a heated storage unit facility from the water utility for $1.
I'll second that.
So a motion and a second. Dan?
This is all public money. We got one pocket, we got another pocket. We're all ratepayers. We met with you and talked it over with you. I guess you are going to save some money on the rental space that you're currently using to put the equipment. It seems like this thing's going to be full the second you get it. But I don't understand the $46,000. It seems like, this is all the city. We're one big happy family. Let's make it $1.
Christie. Oh, yes.
Could I weigh in on that? And I appreciate the sentiment and the idea that it's just moving money from one pocket to another. But as Troy said, they really are two separate legal entities. The enterprise funds establish rates, and we need to put money back into that fund, and then another fund can buy it. So although it does seem not very efficient, I think legally that is something that we need to do.
Is it illegal?
I think you could get challenged. If I was a ratepayer, could challenge you that you're not, that you're giving away money or giving away assets that have been purchased via my rates that I've paid. So I would say it is challengeable.
Well, but it's been depreciated. I mean, we do depreciation every year. They don't need it. If they needed it, they'd still have it. So that was why I chose $1.
Christie.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Well, I tend to agree with Dan. Even though it's challengeable, I mean, anything's challengeable, and the rates aren't going to decrease because Tim would pay $46,000. My experience working for the police department, which is not an enterprise fund, it's all general fund. When our jalopies were really bad, which they are really bad most of the time, we would kick them down the road to building or whatever so they could drive that piece of crap car for a while. And never even imagine saying, give us $500, $1,000 or whatever. So I think if we're able to help each fund, or excuse me, each department with equipment that's no longer needed or buildings that's no longer needed, that's what we should be looking at.
Mayor Woodmar,
yes.
I don't want to keep beating the horse, but there is a distinction, a legal distinction between the general fund departments, like a police department, and the enterprise funds, wastewater, water, or utilities. Their fees are based on charges. Their rates are based on what it costs to do their business. The general fund, police, legal, other departments, those are funded by property taxes, general taxes. So they're different entities. So I won't beat that horse anymore, but I think it's important to keep that distinction, recognize that distinction.
Any further discussion on the motion that's on there, Dan?
Sure, just that, I agree that common sense would say, yeah, we're one big happy family and all of that, and you do that. And in some cases, like, rolling the vehicles down from one department to another, I mean, that can make some sense. But from my time as county auditor and other things, I mean, these kind of inter-fund governmental transfers are pretty common, and they keeps things clean. Again, it may not seem to make common sense, but anyway, I think we should do it. But
all right. Any further discussion on the motion?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
One more comment. Seems like when we buy tractors in the sewer area and the water department, that guess what? They can help us do Leaf Fest. So I'm thinking that in the same term as if you're buying a piece of equipment that can be helped to use in one department for another, helping in stormwater or helping in snow removal or helping in Leaf Fest, that $46,000 for $1 is, we're accomplishing the same thing just through a little different pathway, and it's fun. And it feels good.
Mayor Whitmire, can I beat the horse one more time?
Well, the horse is on life support, so
okay.
this will be it.
The drainage utility is an enterprise fund, and they keep track of their hours, right, Tim?
Correct.
So that we establish our rates for our rate payers, and it's all accounted for when we use equipment from general funds. So I just want to make sure that everybody knows that's what we do when we keep records of things, because otherwise it would be subject to a legal challenge. I'm done.
Have to try.
All right. So if there's no other discussion, roll call, please. Renata?
Wood?
What's the motion again?
Sorry. The motion by Gookin, seconded by McEvers, to approve the drainage utility to purchase the heated facility from the water department for $1.
Yes.
Evans?
No.
Miller?
No.
McEvers?
Yes.
Kukin?
Yes.
English?
No.
Mayor?
Yes. Need a motion to recess?
So moved.
Well, motion to recess to June 8, 2020 at noon in the library community room located at 702 East Front Avenue for a workshop regarding the budget priorities.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
We are recessed.